Welcome to another installment of Magical Mystery Talk. This is the Beatles-related show that, to paraphrase an old Heineken TV beer ad in the UK, reaches the places other shows don't reach or dare to go. So we cover esoteric, occult and conspiratorial aspects of the Beatles. So not the sort of thing you hear Mark Lewison talk about, basically. So joining me as ever are Matt and Desiree. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
It's good to be back. We tend to only manage a couple of these a year now. And when listeners hear the level of comprehensive research that's gone into this one, they'll understand why. So we had hoped to get together in December. But as John Lennon sang on Beautiful Boy, life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. So that didn't happen. So we've regrouped for January 23. To be fair, we did manage one show last year in the summer, and we covered a whole load of topics there. But in this one, we'll sort of cover the year as a whole and just catch up on where we left off from last time, I guess. So I'm going to pour myself a cocktail, recline in my hammock, and pretty much give the floor to Matt and Desiree. So it's been a year in the life. See what we did there.
Very good.
I think maybe to set the tone, I should just point out that we're a few weeks on from October, which was the 60th anniversary of effectively the launch of the Beatles with their first single, Love Me Do. And that was released in the UK on the 5th of October, 1962, which also turns out to be the very same day that the first James Bond film, Dr. No, was released. So we've got two major British institutions, both of which I would argue have been used for social engineering purposes through the decades, launched on the same day. So, maybe that's a good starting point for the discussion.
Well, yeah, and I know James Bond, the movie franchise has continued up until this very day as we speak, but it's very much seen in some respects as a 60s archetype, isn't it? When you look at the Beatles or Carnaby Street or the miniskirt, Mary Quant, you look at James Bond and it has that quintessential kind of swinging 60s kind of vibe to it. So, sure. Yeah. I mean, that in itself beginning, being released, Dr. No being released on the same day as Love Me Do, two main archetypes of the 60s kicking off on the very same day. Yes. Very
and of
interesting.
Course, George Martin scored Live and Let Die, and Paul McCartney did the theme tune for it. So we got a direct link there.
And I think, I might be wrong, off the top of my head, didn't he also do some of the Shirley Bassey themes as well? I think he might have produced Goldfinger.
George Martin?
George Martin. I think he might have done Goldfinger. If not Goldfinger, he might have done some of the other Shirley Bassey ones. I think he might have even done the Matt Monro one from Russia with Love, but I don't know. It's just how my wavy memory is playing at me at the minute. Maybe it's just too wavy and too wonky to be true, but I seem to recall that he did work with Shirley Bassey, who did a whole load of those Bond themes during the 60s and 70s, certainly in the 60s. He did a lot of those with her, or some of them with her, and one of those, or more than one of those, was a George Martin production, and it could have been Goldfinger, but don't hold me to that. But certainly he did. I think he did work with Shirley Bassey on some Bond themes. Yeah, I'm going off.
Goldfinger, the movie, the Beatles were actually mentioned by Sean Connery's character.
Oh right, okay, I missed that one.
He's talking about champagne being served at the correct temperature, and he said, "If you don't, it's like listening to the Beatles without earmuffs."
Oh right, yeah, that's it. Yeah. And apparently there was a documentary that came out a few years back, and I think it was called Produced by George Martin, and it was basically a documentary about George Martin, his life, his career, and apparently, according to his son Giles in this documentary, George Martin can make a mean. What's that drink that James Bond drinks?
Vodka martini.
Yeah, vodka martini, shaken not stirred.
Shaken not stirred.
Yeah, apparently George Martin can make a mean martini, shaken not stirred, vodka martini, shaken not spurred. So yeah, he was a bit of a Bond archetype himself. George Martin, with the with the combed back hair and the suave debonair sort of air about him, and the suits and everything, and the posh accent. So yeah, he was sort of likened to James Bond by some people because he had that sort of air about him. But so there you go. Jimmy Page. I know we're going off a tangent, but Jimmy Page was one of the hardest. I know, and it's always me, isn't it? Jimmy Page was one of the hardest working session musicians in the 60s before he joined Led Zeppelin. He played on loads of 60s tracks, and apparently he played on Goldfinger. So there you go. If you ever get asked that in a pub quiz, what famous rock musician played on Goldfinger? Apparently played on Goldfinger, yeah. So, yeah.
Wow. There's Aleister Crowley connections as well. Ian Fleming actually worked with Crowley during the Second World War in British Naval Intelligence. And of course, there's endless Crowley links to the Beatles, but that's probably a tangent we shouldn't go off at just for now.
Yeah.
Just yet. Anyway.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of tangents to come. So
I'm sure there will.
Yeah, let's leave that one aside for now. Yeah.
And of course, Ringo married a Bond girl.
Oh,
right?
yes, of course.
So, of course.
That's right. Good
You have to
call.
mention
Yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah,
Barbara
Bach. Yeah.
My favourite Bond films ever. I know it's a bit of a comedy, The Spy Who Loved Me. It's not serious Bond, as it were, but it's a bit of a comedy.
Well, it's not
a bit
as
of
bad
a
as
slapstick.
Moonraker.
Yeah. Oh, I quite liked Moonraker, actually. I thought
Well,
it was quite. You noticed that Spy Who Loved Me was a film about the sea. Somebody wanted to take over the world and turn and basically destroy the world and make a new world under the water. And Moonraker, which was the film that followed it, was a film about someone who wanted to destroy the world and make a world in space, so above the ground.
Exactly.
So
same script, but just slightly different.
Basically, yeah.
And it was like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates as Bond villains.
Yeah, exactly. But oh God, horrible. Yeah.
Anyway, back to the Beatles. So we wanted to talk about Revolver, which you had mentioned has come out as a deluxe edition, a sort of re-release.
Yeah.
And that, to me, marks the turning point, or the major turning point, in the Beatles' music. It was the end of phase one. So the days of She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand were over. And they'd started to get experimental, avant-garde, psychedelic, and it was paving the way for Sergeant Pepper and Magical Mystery Talk and stuff. And of course, that's the album that contained Tomorrow Never Knows, which is a very trippy track. And in my view, the Beatles were used for social engineering agendas from that point forward, and probably before that. And we've got a loose general theme of sort of social engineering psyops for this show from present day. But maybe you just want to say a bit more about the significance of Revolver.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you think, Desiree, but as soon as the Beatles started recording in the studio with EMI in 1962 with Love Me Do, from Love Me Do onwards, every single song that came out after that, just about every single single that came out or album was different. It was it was, we talk about Revolver being a turning point, but if you look before,
it was like an evolution.
Yeah, it was an evolution. If you look before Revolver, you had the album Rubber Soul, and then you had all these singles before it. Each song was an evolution. It was a new sound. It was something different. It was always evolving, getting more grander, getting more sophisticated. So you could say that Revolver was almost the peak of that, although Sergeant Pepper, I think, was the ultimate peak. But yeah, Revolver was definitely, I think, the landmark point where you could say, the Beatles have changed. They're completely different.
Right.
Rubber Soul, the album before it, was a departure in sound for them. It was a departure away from the fluffy pop, but it's seen as an album. It's seen as a departure from She Loves You, of course, and all those other early singles. But yeah, definitely, when you look at Revolver, there is a marked difference there when you compare it to what happened before. And Tomorrow Never Knows is absolutely, to my ears, absolutely the song that typifies that we've reached a new landmark here in the Beatles sound and the Beatles attitude, you might say. Revolver came out in box set form. It was re-released in October in the UK. Anyway, it was released in October of 2022. And this is just another in a series of box sets, deluxe box set re-releases that have been coming out from the Beatles. I mean, this is standard, isn't it? This is standard nowadays for bands and artists who've been around for many decades to do this. This has been going on for quite a few years now. You know, bands and artists re-releasing old albums from decades gone by.
Do you think they'll be doing One Direction and Ed Sheeran box sets in 50 years?
Yeah, I think they will. If you look around at websites that sell vinyl and sell, you know, music in physical format, yeah, just about any band that you can think of that's been around for more than 30 years is re-releasing their product in box set form. You know,
they got to make money somehow.
Yeah, it's just a way of getting people to spend their money on something that they've already bought. You know, it's a cynical way of looking at it.
What a horrific thought, an Ed Sheeran box set. Yeah.
Well, you know, it will happen. It will happen if the current market carries on the way it is. The trend for box sets is, if it continues that way, if it continues this way, it will happen. It will happen.
Or if the world is still here in 50 years.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's kind of a way to stay relevant too, you know. I mean, it's like if you don't continually release things, you know, I mean, maybe not with the Beatles so much, but you know, like you don't want to get forgotten about or get, you know, just a part of history. You got to keep current. You got to keep relevant to today's, you know, listeners too.
I mean, I don't want to speak for Apple, the company that the Beatles company, basically their record company and everything, but I get the feeling that one of the reasons that they do this is not only to sell something to old fans who are basically buying the same thing again, but I think they're doing this also to introduce the music to a younger audience, you know, to 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, teenagers, you know, introducing and hooking them into it, you know, so that they get hooked into it for the next 40, 50, 60 years, and they buy, and they in later years will start buying Beatles product that they already bought before, you know, getting them caught into that sort of cycle. But yeah, this has been going on for years. The Beatles are quite new to it, actually. They only started doing it in 2017, I think it was, when they released a box set edition of Sergeant Pepper's, the Sergeant Pepper album. So basically in this box set, you got what you get normally from these box sets. You get outtakes of tracks that never made it onto the album, so outtakes and demo versions, and even tracks that they worked on but never, you know, actual songs that they worked on but then thought to themselves, we don't like this, we're not going to put this on the album. So, and you get, you know, remastered versions of the album and remixes and live DVDs and books and all you know, like books that come attached with it. And so yes, the Beatles got into that in 2017 for the first time with Sergeant Pepper to mark the 50th anniversary of its release. Then in 2018, we had the Beatles album, which is, of course, the White Album, named, of course, the White Album because of the plain white cover. Then in 2019, we had Abbey Road, get the box set treatment. Then in, I think it was 2020.
And we had COVID.
Yeah, and in amongst all that, we got the Get Back, Let It Be album, Let It Be, which originally came out in 1970. And yeah, the most recent one is Revolver, which originally came out in 1966. So it's not a 50th anniversary because it was released in the box set came out in October of 2022. But yeah, on that album you've got Tomorrow Never Knows, and if you want to look at potential or possible signs for social engineering, I would suggest, I just put this across as a possible, that if you're looking for clues for that, then I would say Tomorrow Never Knows is one of those songs on that album. And I would also say that it's a twin. If it was a song that was aimed at social engineering, then it's a twin-pronged attack. It's there's a couple of elements in there that for example, when I talk about a twin-pronged attack, one of those prongs would be the promotion of LSD, because as you guys know, Tomorrow Never Knows is a song basically which was inspired by the book, which was co-written by so-called acid guru and alleged CIA agent Timothy Leary, a book that he co-wrote called The Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Psychedelic Experience. Basically, John Lennon read this book and decided to write a song based on what he'd read. And in fact, the opening lyrics to that song are actually lifted from the actual book. Now, I might be wrong about this. I think the book came out in 1966, I think. And I might be wrong, but I think the reason that that book came out is basically it's a guidebook. Okay. So because at the time, LSD was still wasn't a street drug in early to mid 1966. LSD was still, in terms of it being a street drug, was virtually unheard of. It was the only people that were using it in a street drug environment would have been the people that were sort of within the underground of the countercultural movement, which still at that time, the so-called counterculture movement, the so-called hippies and so on, which was still at that time in early to mid 1966, a very underground movement. It still hadn't gone mainstream. So at that time, the only people that would have been aware of what LSD would have been the underground element, so-called counterculture, the very deep underground element of that. And also, of course, the other people that were using it at that time, which wasn't the mass populace, it wasn't a street drug. It was the military, it was intelligence, it was psychiatrists who were using it on unsuspecting human guinea pigs, i.e. their patients. It was universities that were also using it in experiments, and of course the MK Ultra experiments, as we now know. In the 1970s, it came out. Documents were discovered to prove that LSD was being used in the 1950s by the CIA, and also by the UK as well. The military and intelligence services in the UK was being used in the 50s and 60s to try and see if it could be used to make a Manchurian candidate, an assassin at will, or if it could be used as a truth serum.
Mark Chapman style, indeed. Or if it could be used as a truth serum in the so-called Cold War, if it could be used against an enemy agent to extract truth from them. So it was very much, I think the CIA, if I'm not mistaken, was the biggest buyer of LSD in the late 40s or into the 1950s. I think Sandoz laboratories where it was being manufactured, I think the CIA bought up its entire stock to be used in its intelligence experiments. So here we have Timothy Leary, who in the 1950s and early 60s, around that time, was a Harvard professor, and he too was using psychedelics, as experimenting with psychedelics to see the effects of how it manifested itself on the human mind, and he was also involved in something that was called the Concord Prison Experiment, which was a US military linked and US intelligence linked experiment. Basically, he was testing hallucinogenics on prisoners to see what the effects were. I don't know if the prisoners knew that they were being administered with this drug, or if they knew what the effects were going to be. But certainly he was involved in those kind of experiments. And then, of course, so we're told, he got fired from Harvard, and that's when he went off and became this LSD guru. But as many critics, there were people at the time, if I'm not mistaken, within the so-called radical movement, people within who you would think would be on his side within the so-called countercultural movement, who are actually very suspicious of Leary, who actually have said, it's documented, have actually said that they suspected Leary of being a CIA agent. Leary himself admitted quite a few times that he had been an asset of the CIA. There's plenty of video footage of him saying that. And
there's an interview that you can find, which I think he did in 1965 or 66, sometime around then. You can find this interview. I think it was a magazine interview or something, and this was to do with his phrase, "Tune in, turn on, drop out," and basically what he said, I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have the quote here in front of me, but basically what he said was when the person that was interviewing him asked him what he said, what he meant precisely by drop out, Leary said, well, by drop out, I mean just drop out of protest. Don't bother protesting against Vietnam. Don't burn your draft cards, which is what youngsters in America were doing, because they were scared they were going to get, young teenagers and people in their early 20s were scared they were going to get drafted into the Vietnam War. They were burning their draft cards in protest against the US government. And basically what Leary was saying, what he meant at that time by drop out was drop out of protest. So this falls exactly into those of us who are suspicious of him. That falls exactly into why we are suspicious of him. We, as you guys know, there are those of us within the alternative arena who have accused or put forward the suggestion that Leary was basically there in the 1960s. He was put there on this podium by these so-called powers that be as a false leader. So basically, he was taking the disaffected emotions and feelings of protest that the young had in America and indeed in Britain, and taking that dissatisfaction, taking that feeling of protest and anger at the way that America was dealing with Vietnam and with other issues, taking that anger and misdirecting it and taking it towards a dead end. And one of those dead ends would be to take acid, to drop out, so to basically disengage yourself from protest. So right in the middle of this, in the middle of 1966, we've got the Beatles, the most famous band in the world, not only the most famous band in the world, the most famous performers in the world, and arguably you could say the most famous people in the world, pushing or singing about a drug, okay, that the main population will have never have heard of, okay, because that's how it would have been when this album came out, when Revolver came out and Tomorrow Never Knows came out. They wouldn't have known, that the main population wouldn't have been that aware or at all of what LSD was. They may have never even have heard the term LSD, let alone know what it is.
Exactly. Well, the following year, 1967, McCartney gave an interview where he admitted to taking LSD, and he made out the press had kind of coerced him into making that admission, but it seems pretty clear that it was scripted and he was always intended to just help push things along by making those comments. And then years later, in 1980, in one of his Playboy interviews, John Lennon said, "We must never forget to thank the CIA for their role in putting all the acid out in the counterculture," or words to that effect. I paraphrase.
Yeah.
But it seems pretty clear that the Beatles knew what they were caught up in and what they were helping to push.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I've got the introduction page here from Leary's book, which he co-authored, The Tibetan Book of the Dead, The Psychedelic Experience. I've got the general introduction here. Now, basically, basically what this book was. So as I was saying before I went off into one of my tangents, basically, if I'm not mistaken, this book, which came out, as I say, at a time in 1966 when the main population wouldn't have known what LSD was basically a guidebook, okay? So this was for people who had never taken LSD before, and who didn't really know what it was about, okay, but wanted to take it. So basically, because I've never taken acid myself, but I know lots of people who have, and I've been in a room with them when they've taken it too. So I know what it can do. I've got quite a good idea of what happens and what can and the potential dangers of it. Okay, and one of the potential dangers is that if you take it in the wrong frame of mind, if you're not mentally prepared for it, or if you're stressed out about something, worried about something, or you're feeling pretty negative, or you're with negative people when you take it, you can have a hellish experience. It won't be a trip you'll enjoy. It will be hell. It will be a living hell. So basically what this book was, it was a guidebook to guide somebody through the process of taking it and not having a bad trip. And I've got the general introduction here from the book, a summarized version of it, and it includes the opening line. That it includes the line. There's a line in this introduction that John Lennon used to open Tomorrow Never Knows, and the this is how the introduction goes. This is what Leary and his co-author wrote. They wrote, a psychedelic experience is a journey to new realms of consciousness. The scope and content of the experience is limitless, but its characteristic features are the transcendence of verbal concepts, of space-time dimensions, and of the ego or identity. Such experiences of enlarged consciousness can occur in a variety of ways: sensory deprivation, yoga exercises, disciplined meditation, religious or aesthetic ecstasies, or spontaneously. Most recently, they have become available to anyone through the ingestion of psychedelic drugs, such as LSD. Of course, the drug dose does not produce the transcendent experience. It merely acts as a chemical key. It opens the mind, frees the nervous system of its ordinary patterns and structures. The nature of the experience depends almost entirely on set and setting. You must remember too that the experience is safe and that all of the dangers which you have feared are unnecessary productions of your mind. Whether you experience heaven or hell, remember that it is your mind which creates them. You must try to maintain faith and trust in the potentiality of your own brain and the billion-year-old life process. With your ego left behind you, the brain can't go wrong. You must remember that throughout human history, millions have made this voyage. Trust your divinity, trust your brain, trust your companions. Whenever in doubt, turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. That's the line that Lennon used to open the song. Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. And I've got a quote here, direct from Lennon, about the song and Leary. He said, Leary was the one going around saying, take it, take it, take it. And I did it, just like he said in the book. And then I wrote Tomorrow Never Knows, which was almost the first Acid song. I don't know what he means by almost the first. I would have thought it was the first, but maybe he's not talking from, maybe there's been other songs before that which were not commercial that were about, I'm sure there probably were actually, but in terms of, I would argue that in terms of popular music, in terms of pop music, I would probably say that is the first one, like blatant one, but I might be wrong. But the thing is, anybody who wants to accuse the Beatles of being social engineers with regards to LSD and the pushing of it could say that they were doing it with this song. Because as I said earlier, in the middle of 1966, when the Beatles recorded this song and released it, LSD was still largely unknown, or just about totally unknown to the mainstream. And I'm talking here about Britain, Great Britain, the UK, although I do suspect that it was pretty much the same in America too. So basically, the Beatles, with this huge audience that they had, and we're talking about a cross section. This is the key thing. It's not just a huge audience, it's a huge cross section. So we're talking about everybody from toddlers, 3-year-olds to 14, 15-year-old teenage girls, to mums and dads and grandparents and aunties and uncles. We're talking the complete cross section of the populace were into the Beatles. So basically what you have here is the Beatles releasing a song about an unknown drug and it being listened to by 14, 15, 13, 12-year-old teeny boppers, kids, basically. So basically what you're doing there is whether they were willing in it or not, whether it was intentional or not, what the Beatles were doing with that song was promoting LSD to a huge, billions of people who would never have heard of it, and to kids, basically, because their audience at that time was still a teenage audience. This was before they went fully far out, in later years, and they began to attract an older listening audience. They were still a teeny bopper, mop top sort of boy band at that time. So this is
This is the classic bait and switch, which they've done with so many acts since. I mean, you think of Miley Cyrus, which I always give as an example. When she first came out, she was Hannah Montana, squeaky clean, wholesome, family friendly. And then virtually overnight, she becomes this satanic whore, dressed up as a baby, simulating masturbation on stage. So they get the fan base. The fan base gets to trust the artist.
Britney Spears. The list is countless. I can't remember them all now, but yeah, that's how they start.
So many,
there's
Beyonce,
so many of
Destiny's
them.
Child.
Yeah, they start off so innocent. Yeah, Beyonce and Destiny's Child. They was just like an R&B, pop R&B group, and then she becomes Sasha Fierce, and she gets, and yeah, it just
and then she becomes a demon. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, I think there's a two-pronged. If it's an attack on the culture, then it's a two-pronged attack. And the first prong, as I say, is the promotion of LSD, and the second prong would be that Tomorrow Never Knows was promoting the avant-garde. And I know you and I, Mark, have talked about this on a previous edition, or one or two previous editions of your Good Vibrations series. We talked about how the avant-garde may have been used with the sponsorship of the CIA and other intelligence services and military to push the counterculture. And if that is the case, then Tomorrow Never Knows would fall into that, I would suggest, because I can't speak for America, but certainly in the UK, when it comes to the counterculture, the 60s so-called Summer of Love, which the counterculture which led to the so-called Summer of Love, that whole scene from 66 onwards to the late 60s, the so-called hippies and all of that. I would suggest that in the UK, certainly in London, which was its main focal point, I would suggest that the foundation stone of the UK counterculture, and it could be the same for America, is the avant-garde. And by the avant-garde, I'm talking about all streams of the avant-garde. I'm talking about art, poetry, music, of course, movies, literature, theatre, street performance, whatever it may be. Yoko Ono was involved in the avant-garde, indeed. She was with the Fluxus movement before she met John Lennon, which was avant-garde. It was an avant-garde art movement that began, which was in New York as well, I think, and then they moved to the UK and did various bits in different locations. But basically, if you look at the avant-garde, say modern art, for example, it's now been proved that Jackson Pollock was being sponsored by the CIA. And there's this. What happened was with the onset of the so-called Cold War, the CIA and also the UK government and various organisations in the UK, including intelligence services, military, etc., what happened was, with the onset of the so-called Cold War, the CIA and all these other bodies in the UK as well, and the US military and the US government decided to pour their money into the avant-garde movement. So we're talking about, what's a good way of describing it? John Cage, okay, he's an avant-garde music artist, okay. And we've talked about this before, Mark, on one of your podcasts. John Cage, he came up with this piece called 433. Basically, this is a basic idea of what avant-garde music is. Basically,
to be intellectual, isn't it?
It's supposed to be intellectual. That's right. Anti-classicist, anti-classic, against classic forms of art, like the old way of, painting, the traditional classicism, So basically what 433 was, when it was premiered, basically and this is how it's a piece that's performed live. It can be recreated anywhere. It's not too difficult to recreate. Basically, when it was premiered, and this is what you do. This is how 433 is played live. When it was premiered in an open air venue. I think this is in the late 50s or mid 50s. I can't remember when. And this was a piece by John Cage, who is like one of the gods of the avant-garde music scene. So basically what happened was there was this audience watching the stage. There was a grand piano on the stage. A man walked on, a pianist walked on, or a man walked on dressed in the traditional top hat and tails, like a classic classical music, musician. He sits at the piano, he lifts up the lid of the piano, and then he just sits there. And then after 4 minutes and 33, after playing nothing, not even putting his hand on the keys, not even caressing the keys, let alone playing them, he puts the lid back down on the piano, gets up and walks off the stage. And apparently, according to a couple of articles I've read about this, apparently after this premiere, John Cage was asked, what the hell was all that about? He said, well, you obviously don't get it. If you're asking me, you obviously don't understand. basically what he was saying was that everything around the performance, the so-called performance of this guy sitting there and not playing the piano, is the music. So here we had people sitting in an open air venue, and the way John Cage explained it, I think, was say for example, a bird flies by and tweets, or somebody in the audience is eating some candy and they scrunch the wrapper up with their hand. That's the music. It's the ambient sounds that you hear from the silence of the pianist not playing the music. So basically, this is a basic summary of what the avant-garde is. Another quick one is, and I think this was Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, who is on the front cover of Sgt. Pepper, another avant-garde music god. And I think it was Stockhausen, but certainly another musical piece is where somebody takes a microphone into a helicopter that's moving, flying, and puts the microphones up against the rotor blades, and that's the music piece. That's the performance. It's the sound of the rotor blades going around in a helicopter. So this is what the avant-garde is. This is avant-garde music.
Do you ever get the feeling they were taking the piss?
Yeah, it's a tonal music. Okay, it's music without. It's not traditional music. It's not verse chorus. It's not melody. It's randomness.
Well, isn't it interesting, Matt, that performance piece you mentioned came in at 433, which is one above 432, and 432 hertz is said to be the harmonic frequency that we should all be listening to our music at. So it's like they've taken it up one as a sort of slap in the face to that harmonic frequency within music.
And 33 as well. 33.
Yeah, nice touch.
Yeah, nice touch. So basically, this is what the CIA and the UK as well was financing during the so-called Cold War. They decided to pour their money into this kind of thing, and their argument was that what they were trying to do by doing that was they were starting a cultural Cold War. So basically, what they were doing, they were saying, "Hey, Russia, hey, USSR." You see, you're not as open-minded as us Americans and British, are you? Because look, we foster like different kinds of music. You know, we're open-minded. We're not closed-minded like you guys, you know, who only listen to your classical music and your ballet and all that traditional rubbish from hundreds of years ago. Look at us. We're open-minded, you know. And one of the things that they financed, so it's claimed, was a place called the Darmstadt School, which is in Germany. And this was a place which still exists to this day. I think it started in the late 50s, early 60s, as a lot of this stuff did back then with all this kind of thing. And basically, it's a place, it's called a summer school, but it's not really a school. It's a place where all the avant-garde composers and music artists converge to twice a year. And this is a place where they premiere their new compositions. It's a place where they hold lectures, symposiums, discussions, that kind of thing. And one of the people that used to
just
go
outside
to this,
Frankfurt, as in the Frankfurt School.
Well, exactly. And bang on, Mark, you're bang on, because one of the people that used to go
Theo
to this
Adorno with his 12 atonal system.
Yes, well, Theo Adorno was one of the people that used to go there. And you can find a photograph of him, actually, I think, at the Darmstadt School, talking with Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, the very man who's on the front cover of Sgt. Pepper. And there is a claim by, and I do apologize if I've got the composer wrong. I think it was by a composer by the name of Karl Böhmer. And he used to go to Darmstadt. And he said in an interview some years back, he said that where John Cage and Theo Adorno went, the CIA was never far behind. So with all that, taking all that into account, here we have Paul McCartney in the middle of the 1965, 64, 65, falling in with the Asher family. So he was going out at the time with Jane Asher, the actress, and her brother had just started the Indica Bookshop and Gallery, and he opened. It's a shop, a gallery, and a bookshop which he opened in London in Mason's Yard, I think it was called. And basically, it was him.
What's in a name?
Yeah, Peter. It was Peter Asher, Jane Asher's brother, also John Dunbar, who was married to Marianne Faithfull before she left and went off with and started a relationship with Mick Jagger, and also a guy by the name of Barry Miles. And basically this gallery and bookshop was an avant-garde gallery and bookshop. So the bookshop not only sold avant-garde books, it also sold avant-garde music, so albums, LPs, vinyl LPs and all the rest of it. And Paul McCartney fell in with this crowd because he was, thanks to his relationship with Jane Asher, he got friendly with Peter Asher, and through that friendship, he got to meet the guys at the Indica. And through this relationship, he got very friendly with Barry Miles, and Barry Miles effectively drew McCartney into this avant-garde world and opened his eyes up to it. And indeed, McCartney helped to finance this bookstore and gallery when it first opened. And indeed, this is where John Lennon found the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the psychedelic experience. This is the shop where John Lennon came into contact with the book. John Lennon went into the shop. So, and this is according to Barry Miles. According to Barry Miles, John Lennon came into the shop one day, into the bookshop, and was looking around. He wanted something completely different from what he was given. He didn't want the Tibetan Book of the Dead. He'd never even heard of it. But yeah, he was looking for something completely unrelated. And Barry Miles came up to him and said, well, we haven't got that book that you're looking for, but hey, you should really read this, and gave him the book. And so the story goes, John Lennon then sat down on the sofa and read the whole thing there and then and soaked it in, and then went into the studio and gave us this song. Now, so here we have McCartney getting soaked into this avant-garde world, this CIA avant-garde world, CIA-funded avant-garde world, which is the underpinning of the counterculture in the UK, which has also been accused of being a social engineering instrument. And one of the things that was used by the avant-garde, one of the popular things that was used in avant-garde experimentation and art and music was cut-ups. William Burroughs, the beat poet, was into cut-ups. He was one of those that was very much into this. And basically what cut-ups are is you get tape, you record things, and then you get the tape and you cut the tapes up, and then you put them back randomly and see what, because randomness is one of the things that was very big in the avant-garde music world. No structure, everything is random. You compose a song not from structure, not from sitting down and noting it on a piece of paper, and it's about seeing what comes out of your head naturally. So it's a random thing. So that's what Tomorrow, if you listen to Tomorrow Never Knows, the background of it, it's those weird sound effects that sound like seagulls. Well, basically those are cut-ups. Paul McCartney, so the story goes, Paul McCartney turned up to Abbey Road one day to the EMI studios where they were recording the album. And and he had a bag full of these tape, of recordings he'd made at home on his home tape machine. And they sat down in the studio, and so the story goes, if I'm not mistaken, they cut all these tapes up, threw them in the air, and then taped them back randomly, and then played them through a machine, and that became, this random cut up became the background sound that we hear on Tomorrow Never Knows. So that's what I mean by two-pronged attack. So we've got the LSD on one side, and on the other side we've got the promotion of the avant-garde through this song with the cut-ups on it, because that is, I would argue, even though I wasn't around in the 60s, I would argue that when people heard Tomorrow Never Knows for the first time back in 1966, they would have thought to themselves, I have never heard anything like this before. And even to this day, it sounds otherworldly. I would suggest that it's probably the first ever pop song with samples in it. But that's just me. That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah. It was probably as trippy as the TV audience in Britain on Boxing Day 1967 having Magical Mystery Tour, the movie, appear on their TV as they ate their turkey sandwiches.
Yeah, exactly.
That would have blown their minds as well.
Definitely random.
Yeah, that was random. Well, that was avant-garde. That was avant-garde. I think McCartney has said it. It was an avant-garde experimental film. And also on the Revolver box set, you get the track Rain. Now, Rain never came out on Revolver, but in the UK, Rain came out in 1966 as the B-side of Paperback Writer. It was never on Revolver, but for some reason, I think because it came out in 66, on this Revolver box set, you get Rain in the box set as well as Paperback Writer. And if you listen to the last verse of Rain, it's being played backwards. It's a tape that's been manipulated. If you listen to the last verse, it's John singing, but it's been played on the tape backwards. So he's singing backwards. Again, this is avant-garde experimentation. This is cut-ups. This is tape manipulation. This is all very avant-garde. So you could say that they were promoting, whether willingly or not, they were promoting the avant-garde. Certainly the Indica Gallery had an effect on this song, because had not of John gone into that shop, into the Indica, and Barry Miles had not have handed him that book, would he have made the song? Would he have ever read the book?
And if he'd never been to the Indica, would he have met Yoko? Damn it.
Right.
Anyway.
Exactly. That's where they met.
It was also very avant-garde. You know, that was the whole point.
Yeah, that whole scene was avant-garde, wasn't it? She was avant-garde. And although it has been argued that they never actually met there first, isn't it? Listen, before we get off the subject of Revolver, just one more thing I'd like to mention about the album. Before it was given the title Revolver, the Beatles did actually discuss some other possible titles for the album before they came up with the title of Revolver. And many of the titles that they came up with for possibles were titles to do with magic, and perhaps you might say Crowley-esque magic, titles such as Magic Circle, Four Sides to the Circle, and Abracadabra as well. Now, Abracadabra, I think it's safe to say that to most people, if you were to ask most people to think of the word abracadabra, it would be they would think innocently of it, right? They'd think of, imagine, the image of a magician in a top hat and tails pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Abracadabra, that kind of thing. Children's birthday parties, magicians at children's birthday parties, abracadabra. But from what I understand, the word abracadabra actually it dates back thousands of years and has occult connotations. And in the 20th century, Crowley did actually quote the word in a number of his written works, although he pronounced it or spelt it as abrahadabra. I don't want to go too much into it here, but we have talked a little bit about the Beatles and their possible relations to Crowley. For example, if you look at the cover to their 1965 album Help, we looked into that and possible signs that the hand signals that they're giving on that front cover there of the 1965 album is actually pertaining to hand signals that you can see in a written work, one particular written work of Crowley's. If you want to go and find out more about that, what we talked about, as I say, we talked about that at some length in a previous episode of Magical Mystery Talk, and that would have been episode 2, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, if we go to 1967, a few months after the release of Revolver, there's the cover of Sgt. Pepper, of course, with Crowley on the front cover of that. And then if we look to Magical Mystery Tour, there's a couple of scenes in Magical Mystery Tour that you could say have Crowley-esque connections. And of course there's a song from the film, I Am the Walrus, which opens with the line, I am he as you are me. And as Crowley wrote in his work, Lieber Aber, I think is how you pronounce it, let him write backwards with either hand. Let him constantly watch, if convenient, cinema films and listen to phonograph records reversed, and let him so accustom himself to these that they appear natural and appreciable as a whole. Let him practice speaking backwards. Thus, for I am he, let him say Ehma I. Let him learn to read backwards. And we briefly mentioned the track Rain earlier and the reversed last verse of that song. Well, if we look to what to that Crowley piece there, I just quoted there. What was it he wrote there? Let him constantly watch, if convenient, cinema films and listen to phonograph records reversed. So there, again, another possible sign there. And I'll turn your attention now to 1980 in one of the last interviews that John Lennon gave, and it was to Playboy magazine. He was talking about the Beatles, which it would be no surprise, of course, which is no surprise. And he was talking in particular about the Beatles' attitude to how the band carried itself. And he said, and I quote, "What's this game of doing things because other people want it? The whole Beatle idea was to do what you want, right? To take your own responsibility. Do what you want and try not to harm other people, right? Do what thou willst, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody." So, yeah, what was it Crowley wrote? "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And he also wrote, as I say, in a couple of his works, he referenced the word abracadabra, although he spelt it as abrahadabra. For example, from one of his written works, and I quote, "Let him repeat a word worthy of the ritual. Such are abrahadabra, the word of the aeon, which signifieth the great work accomplished." So yeah, if you remember earlier, I mentioned that the Beatles box set of Revolver, which came out in October of 22, there's a book in that which explains the making of the album, and also some of the events that led up to the making of the album, and also the aftermath of it, the direct aftermath of it, such as how the music press greeted it and how well it sold, and so on and so forth. Now, in this book, in this Beatles Revolver book that you get in the box set, which came out in October 22, there's actually a section there which goes into the history of how the album came, the album title came into being, and it does mention all these magic references. There's a piece from the book here which quotes, which is taken from a quote from the Beatles Book Monthly, which was a monthly magazine that came out during 1963 all the way through to 1969, and it was kind of like a semi-official Beatles magazine. It was given the support of the Beatles. So to quote from there, there's a piece in the Beatles book in the box set which mentions this article from the August 1966 edition of the Beatles Book Monthly, where a reporter from the Beatles Book Monthly has gone to Germany to visit the Beatles, who are in Munich as part of their tour at that time in 1966. And this would have been on the 23rd of June he went to see them. And I quote, this is what the reporter writes: "The boys had to do a bit of quick thinking and come up with a good title for their new LP. After listening to the tracks on George's tape recorder, we all swapped suggestions and came up with names like Magic Circle and Four Sides to the Circle." And then the book, the Revolver Deluxe Edition book, goes on to say, by the time the Beatles were on tour in Japan at the end of June of 66, Abracadabra was on the shortlist. EMI received notification, though, that the album would be called Revolver by a telegram sent from the Tokyo Hilton Hotel on 2nd of July. So presumably that's when the Beatles were playing there, in the country there. And one more quote finally, just to bring this to a close. I've got another quote here. This is from volume 2 of a biography about Beatles producer George Martin. The biography, the 2-volume biography, is called Sound Pictures. And in this book, there's a quote taken from, or an excerpt taken from, one of George Martin's memoirs, which is titled Playback. And I quote, "For the longest time, Abracadabra had been the leading contender, only to be dismissed after one of the Beatles' entourage claimed that it had been used by another artist. Things began to come into focus in Tokyo on 2nd of July after McCartney offered up Magic Circle, which quickly morphed, courtesy of Lennon, into Four Sides of the Circle, and shortly thereafter Four Sides of the Eternal Triangle. And with all talk of geometric concepts being tossed around, McCartney happened upon Revolver." So there you go.
If we keep the conversation loosely rooted in the idea of social engineering agendas then, and the pushing of these, if we bring things up to date with the events of 2022, we might conclude that the Beatles and their affiliates, those that remain today, have been, pushing this stuff ever since, all these decades. One of the items on the list here to talk about is Stella McCartney's pre-COP meeting with World Economic Forum buddies King Charles, as he now is. Just can't take that title seriously. And so Rishi Sunak. And you had mentioned that Rishi and Stella's children go to the same school, which is very cozy. So I don't know if you want to jump in on that one, Desiree, maybe.
Oh, no, I'm good. I don't have.
Or maybe not. All right, Matt.
Well, we were going to talk about this, well, not her meeting with Rishi Sunak and now King Charles. We were going to talk about, because that was ahead of the COP27, which of course stands for the Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC, or otherwise, which stands for the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which takes place every year. COP27 took place in November of 2022 in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. She appeared at Buckingham Palace. She was invited to a reception at Buckingham Palace ahead of that. She didn't go to COP27, but I think it was in the last episode of Magical Mystery Talk, we did consider whether or not to mention the fact that she'd actually gone to COP26, because she'd actually gone, but we didn't mention it. For some reason, we decided not to go with it. But she'd actually gone to COP26. She'd actually gone to that and was quite vocal at that one and quite present. She was, she did quite a lot at that one. And that took place in Scotland in October and November of 2021. And again, at that one, she was in the company of then Prince Charles. And this all kind of ties into the G7. Do you remember what episode was it? I think it was episode. She
took a private jet by any chance?
I would have thought she would. Yeah, I mean that's how these people act, isn't it? This is what they do. She praised Greta Thunberg as well at one of these events. I think it was at COP26. She praised Greta Thunberg as well.
Of course she did.
She called her an effing hero or something along those lines. I've got the quote here in front of me. I'll find it in a minute. But I do remember, if people want to really get into it, if they want to get into the full details of the G7 summit, we talked about that in episode 6. She actually appeared at the G7 summit as well, didn't she? Which took place in Cornwall in England in June 2021. And she was there basically to representing the fashion industry, because of course she has the Stella McCartney fashion brand, these stores, and she's a fashion designer and she makes clothes and accessories and everything. And she was basically, without going into too much detail about that, as I say, if you want to hear the full details of her visit to G7, we get into that in episode 6, I think it is. But yeah, she went to the G7, and again she was in the company of Prince Charles. He'd actually summoned her and a number of other CEOs, a total of about 300 of them, of CEOs, to a meeting to tackle the quote unquote green question. And this was something that had never been done before, apparently, what Prince Charles had put together, the then Prince Charles had put together. So basically he got all these heads of business to come together to talk about the green question. And Stella was invited to go along to basically represent the fashion industry. What I would say, and I don't think I said this in that episode, was, well, who in the fashion industry actually nominated her to go? How does the fashion industry, and by fashion industry, I don't mean just the well-known designers like Chanel and all of those, but I'm talking about like your bread and butter, small business people who have small clothing boutiques and who are small-time clothes designers that actually need the money that they earn, as opposed to her. They actually need the money to put food on the table. Who out of all these people voted
like
for
your
her?
wife, Matt?
Yeah, like my wife, who's got a small clothes boutique. Indeed, she didn't vote for Stella McCartney to go and speak on her behalf. And when she and one of there's a mantra that keeps coming through from that G7 event she went to, and that continues into the COP. And that mantra, it's almost, she kept repeating it, and I've got the quote here. "I am honored to represent the fashion industry." She said this at the G7, "one of the most polluting in the world." And she keeps repeating that. She kept saying that at the COP conference as well at COP26. She says, my goal is to drive change, encourage investment, and create lasting difference through incentives to support the next generation. And I think we said in episode 6, either there's one of many ways that as to the reason why she's doing this. Okay, one, is that she is genuinely altruistic. Okay, that she genuinely cares for the environment and she wants to go out there because what she's calling for, okay, is policing. Right, she wants her industry, she wants the fashion industry to be policed. Now, how many business people do you know? Right, how many business people do you know want governments and local councils and local government to put policing powers on them? How many business people do you know want that to happen? Desiree, you're a business person. Do you want local authorities and government to put more licensing requirements on you and to make you pay more regulatory?
Of course not. There's already enough regulations. We don't need more.
Exactly. So it could be argued that Stella McCartney's being altruistic, but you might argue that, well, it's all right for her, because if her business fails, she can fall back on her millions or she can fall back on her father's billions. But what happens to the bread and butter people who can't afford that? What do they do if their business goes to the wall? They haven't got the same resources and same family background to fall back on. So either she's coming at this from an altruistic, she genuinely cares, but she's a bit naive, or she's coming at this because she genuinely cares, but she's being used as a puppet and she doesn't know it. Or there's the third one, which is, of course, that she knows what she's doing and she's pushing the WEF agenda. At the G7,
I call 3.
Yeah, at G7, she said she urged. This is from Vogue.com, the magazine. This is from their website, the fashion magazine. McCartney urged leaders. This is to do with the G7. She urged leaders to consider doubling down on laws or regulations in the fashion industry that would force designers and brands to not only think more sustainably, but also to act upon it. She said, one of the biggest problems that we have in the fashion industry is we're not policed in any way. We have no laws or legislations that will put hard stops on our industry. So she was at COP26 in October, which took place in October, between October and November 2021. And Prince Charles went along to that, and she had a pop-up exhibition type thing at that, where she was displaying some of her eco-friendly items of clothing and accessories. And Prince Charles went along to this pop-up thing, which I think took place at COP26. And along with Prince Charles, to see this pop-up event of Stella McCartney's, and this was in Glasgow in Scotland, was Leonardo DiCaprio, who, as you guys might know, is also being held up as this champion of the environment, and again, people are saying, well, what hypocrisy for, the criticism that's been aimed at him basically is that, oh yeah, it's all right for him, a multi-millionaire movie star in his private jets, burning all this so-called carbon, burning all this fossil fuels and going on his private jets and all of the rest of it, telling the rest of us in his role as a champion of climate change, so-called climate change, to change our ways, to sacrifice our way of life and to live more frugally, us, the great unwashed, what hypocrisy. So you've got Prince Charles, who also could be accused of that. Prince Charles and Leonardo DiCaprio attending this pop-up shop at COP26, where, Stella was displaying things like vegan lab-grown mushroom leather, which is one of the things that she was displaying there. And again, at this event, she said, I want to highlight my industry and call it out. Here we go. We're one of the most harmful industries in the world to the environment. And what I'm doing here is trying to provide sustainable solutions and technologies and a better way of doing things. And she also said to Vogue magazine, she said, I arrived at COP26 ready to represent the fashion industry. Here we go again. One of the most polluting in the world. I was on a mission to attract the attention of those who have the power to make real change through policies, incentives, and investments supporting nature positive innovation. And she also, again, with regards to Vogue, in an interview, she said, with regards to the G7, that she spent the first day there speaking to the leaders that control all of the money. She said, and I quote, she said, I was there speaking to the leaders that control all of the money, the bankers, the heads of investment funds. They essentially held at their fingertips more trillions than the governments. And nobody wants to invest in dirty business, she said. I was telling John Kerry and Joe Biden and Emmanuel Macron, the French leader and One World Order fan, all these people about this, she said. Firstly, she said, they can't believe we're one of the most harmful industries in the world to the environment. It's like a shock to them. I think on their agenda are all of these other industries, but every single touch point that the obvious industries have, we tap into as a fashion industry. We're using petroleum, we're using energy, we're taking from the soil and not putting nutrients back in, let alone cutting down rainforests for bags and shoes. And so I told them all off a bit, she said, and tried to make them all aware that, and this is where she talks about incentives. Basically what she said was, I tried to make them all aware that when I take a non-leather product into America, for example, I get hit with a 30% tax. As opposed to if I put a slither of pig leather into the same product, the tax disappears. They were shocked by that, she said. And I was like, well, you need to help me change policy, guys. We need to stop this. We need laws like every other big damaging industry that you're talking to at the G7. I asked them for policy change. I asked them to look at where their subsidies were going, and I asked them for incentives for the fashion industry. And at COP26, she took part in an interview which took place on stage. You can find it on YouTube. I actually watched it so that you won't have to, or so the listeners of Magical Mystery Talk won't have to. Went through the pain of that. And yeah, it was like a question and answer thing, basically. She was interviewed on stage. And she also took part in a panel discussion. And this is what she said about the panel discussion. She said, I took part in a panel discussion alongside living legends Al Gore and John Kerry, all of whom I've long admired for their ongoing commitment to the planet. And
their membership of the Skull and Bones Secret Society Mystery School Fraternity in Yale University. Yeah. Very admirable.
So, yeah, John Kerry apparently is US envoy to climate change or something like that. I don't know what, but yeah, fast forward to COP27 then. So, okay, on her official website, she's got a page about this. This is what it says. COP27, our commitments to climate action. As we look ahead, we are actively investing in and innovating regenerative and regenerated solutions that will restore Mother Earth and keep more fibers from entering landfills, incinerators, and our oceans. These solutions are aligned with the 4 COP27 objectives. And then she goes on to list a number of ways in which her company, Stella McCartney, is investing in eco-friendly materials, and she's got a list of them here. You've got Mirum, which is a plant-based vegan alternative to animal leather. You've got Milo, which is a mycelium-based vegan alternative to animal leather. You've got Econyl, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is regenerated and regenerable nylon. You've got Soktas, Soktas, which is the world's first regenerative cotton luxury garment. And you've got Nativa, which is regenerative wool, which is traceable back to the farm and sheep, and also S-Wave, which is a grape-based alternative to animal leather. So that's what they're up to, so she claims. But yeah, so COP27, she didn't go to that, and King Charles didn't go to that. But she was invited to this reception that took place at Buckingham Palace, hosted by King Charles, now King Charles. And check out the guest list, guys. VIPs included. This is according to a report from November 2022. VIPs included at the reception, Keir Starmer, who is the current leader of the UK's so-called opposition party, the Labour Party. Also John Kerry, surprise, surprise, Mike Bloomberg, and Sir Pascal Soriot, the AstraZeneca chief.
Sounds like your worst nightmare becoming a reality.
So what's the AstraZeneca chief doing there? Gosh, I don't even know.
Can't think.
To do with the environment.
Well, it's all agendas. It's all agendas, and the same families used to push them. And It's the same groups used to push him if we keep it within the Beatles. And another agenda has been the Ukraine. This one just seems to run and run. And we've got some Beatles connections there, haven't we? Julian Lennon sang Imagine at a benefit concert, and Paul McCartney waved the Ukrainian flag at his Glastonbury performance last year.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, do you want to jump in on either of those, Desiree? You got anything on those?
Oh, just one more thing about the COP27. Yeah, she met Rishi Sunak there, who is the current Prime Minister, now the Prime Minister of the UK. And yeah, it turns out that her Stella's children and Rishi's children used to go to the same school. So they kind of know each other. The two of them kind of know each other. And this is something they discussed when they met because Rishi Sunak was there at this Buckingham Palace event. But just one laughable quote, okay, just to close this. When Stella was asked about her going to this reception, she said she hoped that the king would help save the world. Okay, move on. Move on. Yeah, Ukraine.
Well,
okay.
As far as Ukraine and the Paul McCartney and pulled his back in the USSR song from his set list on his tour. And I always thought that song in the first place was an interesting choice for the Beatles to even release back in the 60s when it was released.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always been, the USSR had always been a, part of the Cold War and all of that. And that it's a very happy, the line from USSR, you're lucky to be there. You're lucky to be a Russian, and it always seems to me like it was very out of place and raised a few eyebrows, don't you think? And to me, it's like it never really has been talked about. Like, why did the Beatles even release that in the first place? Yeah. Strange. But so now that he's pulling it, and just a few years ago, he was playing in Russia for Putin. He was like the first major artist to play there. Isn't that right? Like back in 2002 or something like that, 2004, he played in the Red Square.
He did. Moscow. He played, in 2003. I think it was part of his European tour at the time. He played he played in Red Square in Moscow, and he played in St. Petersburg as well. And Putin was in the audience at Red Square. Right. He was in the audience. He went along. You can find this footage of this on YouTube. It's not difficult to find. You see Putin walking in halfway through the concert and sitting down with his entourage and watching the concert. There's footage as well of McCartney talking with Putin.
Right.
Because they actually met. I think McCartney and his then wife, Heather Mills, actually met, had a meeting at the Kremlin. I think they actually there are I mean, I might be wrong, but there's certainly photographs you can find of Putin and Heather Mills and McCartney sitting in what looks like a plush, stately room with very stately hall type looking furniture. So I'm presuming it's like one of the annexes in the Kremlin. And they've been invited along to chat with Putin.
Is that the original Putin or the replacement? Or the original McCartney?
Or the original McCartney, yeah. Exactly.
They're both of their doubles.
As we'd say in the UK, bingo. You've hit the nail right on the head, Desiree. It's absolutely true. It just seems to be a little bit of hypocrisy going on here.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if he dropped the song back in the USSR. I'm just going by reports because apparently he went out on a North American tour, his first concert tour since the end of the the Sharona, the lockdowns and everything. And it took place, it started on April the 28th and it finished on the 16th of June of 2022. And it was a North American tour. And there were the reports that I've got that I first started seeing that I saw coming in were from June, and the headlines were that Paul McCartney had dropped back in the USSR from his set list. I don't know if he has because I haven't seen any of these concerts. I'm just going by what these reports are saying. It's really odd. It's quite bizarre if it is true, as you say, because what is the difference? Okay, and let's just, whatever your view is on Ukraine and Russia, let's just say for argument's sake that Russia are the bad guys here. So Russia are the bad guys. They've invaded a country and they're being total bastards. Okay, so what was going on in the world in 1968 when Back in the USSR was recorded by the Beatles and released on their White Album? Well, you could say arguably that what the USSR was doing back then was far worse than what's going on now. Because back in 1968, you had the Berlin Wall. You had this wall in the middle of Berlin, which effectively kept prisoners of one side of a city. You had the USSR's control, dictatorial.
Coming to Oxford soon, Matt.
Exactly, and other places. I think Canterbury as well. Yeah. And various. I think France as well. There's somewhere in France, and also New Zealand or Australia. I think
Berlin Wall rebooted for a new
Berlin
generation.
Wall rebooted, but smart. It's a smart city, Mark. It's not the same thing. It's
that's all right then.
It's for smart people. You'll be able to go to nice little cozy coffee bars and go on your bike and ride around in the rain and the wind on your bike. It'll be lovely.
Nice.
So I mean, you could, and the USSR had control of all those so-called satellite countries. So you could say, well, what's the difference between the Beatles not only singing the song back then, but writing the song and releasing it back then? What's the difference? Right. You could say arguably that the USSR, aka Russia, was actually worse then than what it is now. And not only that, but I don't think McCartney put that song into his set list until 1989, because he didn't tour or play live for most of the 80s. He stopped touring in the 80s, and he didn't start again until 1989. So he toured extensively during the 70s with Wings. I don't think he ever played Back in the USSR with Wings during the 70s, his band. I might be wrong. I think the first time he ever put Back in the USSR on his set list was from 1989 onwards. And if I'm not mistaken, it's been on his set list ever since, because he's toured pretty much extensively since then, especially since Linda died in 1998 or 99, whenever it was. He's toured even more. And Back in the USSR has always been on his set list. Well, let's look at 1989. When did the Berlin Wall come down?
1989.
Was it 1989?
89.
I think it was
89. So would it have been around? So when Paul was singing that, would he have been singing it before the wall came down? You could argue that he was. So again, you could say, well, why is it okay to sing it during your 1989 world tour, but it's not okay to sing it now? There's just this weird thing going on.
McCartney's got previous when it comes to trying to distance himself from people that he previously associated with, because Jimmy Savile toured with the Beatles for a period in 1964, opened up their shows for them, and there's photographs of Paul larking around with Jimmy Savile and the other guys from the group. But when the truth about Jimmy Savile came out, Paul couldn't get to a microphone quick enough to say, oh yeah, I always thought there was something wrong with him. He was always sleazy and creepy and never really liked him. And now he's turning his back on Putin after apparently having been quite pally with him in the past as well.
Indeed, you can find the footage. It's all there. You can find there's news footage on that came out at the time of Paul McCartney and I think Heather Mills as well, walking together in what looks like a courtyard, looking very cozy, looking very friendly. Look, I know times change and people change, circumstances happen. So what the person that you were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago is not going to be the same person that you are now. But nevertheless, I think it is worth mentioning this because I don't want to get into the Ukraine-Russia thing, okay? Because, look, I'm Greek Cypriot, okay? And we've had a lot going on in Cyprus, the country that my parents came from. I was born in the UK, but in some ways you could compare Cyprus to what's Ukraine and Russia. In 1974, the island of Cyprus was invaded by Turkey, and it's now annexed. So the northern part of Cyprus, the island of Cyprus, is Turkish. My parents had moved out of Cyprus long before then. My dad came to Britain in the 50s, and then he married my mum, and they came over together and started a life together, and all the rest of it. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to to give you a picture of what it can be like if you're disassociated from an international situation, say Ukraine and Russia. And this is how some celebrities, I think, are treating this. All these celebrities that are virtue signaling and supporting Russia, I don't think they understand world history. How much do they really understand about what Ukraine and Russia is or has been? One of my earliest memories is watching my dad coming to watch the TV news back in the UK in 1974. You only had 3 channels, and there was no rolling news channels. If you had to watch the news, you had to tune in when the set bulletins, the designated bulletins on the TV were on. And because there was this stuff going on in Cyprus, and my dad's brother was still over there. He's actually a refugee from Cyprus. He was actually there. His land was invaded. My parents' land was invaded, and we haven't got it back, and we never will, I don't think. But so my dad's brother, my uncle, was a refugee. So my dad was very interested to find out on the news what was going on, because he didn't have any contact with him. He didn't know if he was alive or dead. So that's one of my earliest memories, is watching my father watching the news to find out what was going on. Now, I might be wrong, but those mainstream news bulletins was probably one of the first times that the general population of the UK and across the world would have heard of Cyprus, because it's only a small island. And I don't think they probably would have known the history of what's been going on. But a bit like Ukraine, I don't want to compare the two exactly, but a bit like Ukraine and Russia, there is history between Cyprus, which is Greek speaking, Greek culture, and Greece and Turkey. The friction between Greece and Cyprus, and Turkey, has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And the same can be said of Ukraine and Russia. Their history, their interlinked history, has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. So for somebody like McCartney or these other virtue signaling celebrities to come forward and to hold Ukraine flags and to ban certain songs from their concerts and to say all these things that they're saying and shaking hands with Zelensky and all the rest of it, it's all very noble. But are they actually doing it from a educated point of view? Do they actually know the full picture? I've got a statement here, right? And this is reportedly from a podcast that lo and behold, Heather Mills, right? This is from Heather Mills, right? This is a quote I've got from Heather Mills that she gave in a podcast in 2022, right? And this is about her meeting, because she was there, as we mentioned, in Russia when this meeting between McCartney and Putin happened, and the concerts there and everything. Now, she was there as well, as we said, and apparently the reason that Putin and McCartney and Heather all met together was because, if you recall, Heather Mills was quite active. She still might be. She was quite active in the landmines campaign to eradicate landmines from the world. And so I'll give you her quote. Basically, what she's saying is that when Paul McCartney went on this European tour in 2003, I think it was a European tour. She suggested to McCartney, her then husband, that maybe they could put Russia into that tour, so that then she could meet with Putin and get Russia to ratify, to bend to her will, to help rid the world of landmines, and to get the Russians to do something about it. So this is quite an I would suggest that this is more switched on. This is really switched on, what she's saying, I think. I might be wrong, but okay, this is what she said in this podcast. She said, "We were traveling around the world touring. I said to Paul, let's do a concert in Russia and try and get a meeting with Putin so I could see if he will ratify. What we needed was China, America, and Russia. They were the big manufacturers and distributors of landmines, and setting up a concert meant we got to meet Putin." She went on, "Having had a lot of Russian and Ukrainian friends, there are two sides to the story. Let me make it clear. I'm completely against war. Never, ever do they work. But a lot of Ukrainian people have terrible medical care, tiny wages, and want to be a part of Russia. And they should be allowed to be a part of Russia. To have a war is absolutely insane because it creates devastation. But the Ukrainians are not innocent, and neither are the Russians. We're only helping Ukraine as a government because we want the pipelines. We want access to all the ingredients, as there is massive shortage of wheat and gluten at the moment. Also, they are selling weapons. No matter how much they say they are handing them over. As far as the Ukraine and Russia situation is concerned, Both sides are as bad as each other. All wars are a complete waste of time, money, lives, everything. Nobody gains anything except potentially some governments. I think that's pretty switched on.
Yeah, very much so.
Don't say much these days, does she?
It makes you wonder why she's not on the scene anymore,
About anything.
About anything. Yeah. But
she
yeah.
was doing a really bad rap.
Yeah, really bad rap. And the argument is the reason that she got all that bad rap during the divorce proceedings was because McCartney has such a huge sway in the media. He's got friends in the mainstream media, editors, newspaper editors and all the rest of it, all that kind of thing, that helped it along, that made sure that she got a bad rap. I don't know. I mean, she does come across as a bit hysterical at times. I have to say, when I've seen her in interviews, she does seem a little bit hysterical, but that doesn't mean that she's, some people just convey themselves in ways that might look freaky, but actually when you know them, that's just the way they are. That's just their mannerisms. That doesn't necessarily mean that's who they are. But
and you can also argue that the media, right? And you can also argue that the media portrays her in that way specifically on purpose to make her look like she's hysterical when she's, just being herself or being, she went through a divorce from Paul McCartney. It was like the biggest news story for the longest time. How would you feel about that? And being portrayed by as a horrible person that was just trying to take his money. I mean, I don't know. And that interview that you were just talking about, Mark, that was a very interesting interview. She said, I could sell my story right now. Like, I'm not waiting for anything. I could sell it right now. I'm choosing not to, because I'm trying to protect Paul, which was a big statement. If she was out to get Paul McCartney and out to get him to divorce him, she could have said all kinds of stuff and, sold all kinds of books and held all kinds of exposés and whatnot. And,
Payoffs and threats are very motivational factors.
Yeah, especially when you've got billions, Exactly. I mean, I don't know what Julian Lennon's stand is on the whole Ukraine thing. I don't know what angle he's coming from. He might have been, with this Imagine song. I don't know if he was coming at it from a genuinely, genuinely caring sort of standpoint. I don't know, because there's that Imagine. Have you heard?
He's a puzzling one, isn't he?
He's a puzzling one. It was April the 8th when he released his version of Imagine. It's dedicated to the people of Ukraine. Have you guys heard it? It's an acoustic version, basically. It's an acoustic version. I think it's acoustic guitar played by Nuno Bettencourt, who used to be, or probably still is, in Extreme. Do you remember that band from the early 90s? More Than Words. And there was another one that they like. Yeah, there was a couple of hits they had in the UK. There was another one after that, which is a jaunty little acoustic number. But I don't know if they're still together, Extreme. But yeah, it was Nuno Bettencourt did the guitar backing for that, and it was basically Julian singing Imagine solo, apart from that acoustic. And that came out on.
Successfully avoided that so far.
Yeah, you haven't heard it then. It's not.
No, I've taken great steps to avoid it.
Yeah, I don't think it. It's not my cup of tea.
Well, even John Lennon said that the Imagine song was basically communism wrapped up and sugar coated and sung into a song.
Yeah.
Right.
So that makes it a little interesting too, that choosing that song Imagine and the whole situation going on over there. So
yeah,
my least favorite Lennon song.
Yeah, mine too, probably, apart from some of the tracks on Sometime in New York City. But we're digressing again. So he released, I don't think he released Imagine. April the 8th it came out, but I don't think it was MP3 or single or CD or physical format. I think it was just basically online video thing. And there was a statement that came with it, and it was released on April the 8th, and it was part of a weekend of events that was going on. It was all tied into this Ukraine campaign by this rather dodgy looking organization, I would suggest. And the statement that came out with it was, and this is from Julian Lennon: as a human and as an artist, I felt compelled to respond in the most significant way I could. So today, April the 8th, for the first time ever, I publicly performed my dad's song Imagine. Why now, after all these years? I had always said that the only time I would ever consider singing Imagine would be if it was the end of the world. but also because his lyrics reflect our collective desire for peace worldwide. Because within this song, we're transported to a space where love and togetherness become our reality, if but for a moment in time. The song reflects the light at the end of the tunnel that we are all hoping for. As a result of the ongoing murderous violence, millions of innocent families have been forced to leave the comfort of their homes to seek asylum elsewhere. I'm calling on world leaders and everyone who believes in the sentiment of Imagine to stand up for refugees everywhere. Now, according to Julian, he was approached to do this, to do something for Ukraine. And then it was Julian's idea basically to do Imagine, but he was approached to do something for Ukraine by a non-profit organization called Global Citizen. It's part of a campaign that it had started called Stand Up for Ukraine. And it was a campaign basically that was advertised as wanting to raise support basically across the world for Ukraine, a lot of that being financial support, donations and everything. And according to there's a video address I watched. It was very brief. According to Ukraine's President Zelensky, the idea for Stand Up for Ukraine, the whole idea for that campaign by Global Citizen, was an idea that was put forward to Zelensky, I think, by, guess who? Bono.
God, pass the sick bucket.
I thought you might say that. So basically this Stand Up for Ukraine thing was it's an ongoing campaign, but they had this weekend, this active weekend, and it took place between April the 8th and 9th. So April the 8th, we've got the release of Imagine. And then on April the 9th, the song was played on video at the end of what was called a global pledging event. And what this global pledging event was it was a live event in Poland. It was in Poland. I don't want to call it a discussion because it wasn't a discussion. It was basically a table discussion. I would call it more like a table full of sound bites. It was basically promoting Ukraine and denouncing Putin as I think the quote was, I've got it here somewhere. Putin and his war machine was one of the quotes, and he's anti-humanitarian. He's one of the basically the people at the table who were taking part in this quote unquote discussion. Although, as I say, it was mainly loads of sound bites. There was no argument going on between the people on this table. Everyone was in agreement. People appearing at this was the Polish premier. He was there, also the CEO of this Global Citizen, and also the EU's current president, Ursula von der Leyen, and the notorious, you could say, Canadian Premier Justin Trudeau. Basically what this event was, and Justin Trudeau wasn't there live in person. He was there via video link. And during this event, this hour-long event, again, I watched it so that no one else has to go through the pain of watching that crap. Basically through this event, this not so-called discussion, but more like sound bites denouncing Putin. During this event, we got video links. I think they were recorded video links from various world prime ministers from the world, across the world, presidents, all pledging billions towards Ukraine. I can't remember what countries were there, but a hell of a lot of them. Australia, I think, Italy, the UK, of course. Then Prime Minister Boris Johnson was there pledging billions.
It's remarkable how they all agree, isn't it?
It
all
is.
on the same page. No disagreement, no dissent at all.
No, none at all.
Agree with each other.
Indeed. Exactly. There was not one argument during this so-called discussion. Everyone was just singing off the same hymn sheet, as it were. It was just sound bites basically. And I don't know, maybe someone listening to this right now might think, oh, that's a bit rich, isn't it? An EU president and Justin Trudeau of all people talking about humanitarianism, and denouncing Putin for being anti-humanitarian and the horrors and the war that's going on in Ukraine and all the rest of it. I mean, some people might say that there's a touch of hypocrisy going on there. Let's not forget in 2014, and the evidence is out there. It's all out there. It's all there. You can't dispute it. In 2014, that a leader in Ukraine, the then elected leader of the Ukraine was toppled, and replaced by a leader who was more friendly to the US. Then President Obama and his Secretary of State at the time, Joe Biden, were instrumental in toppling one leader and replacing it with another who was friendly to the US's interests and also to the EU's interests. This all can be traced back. You can find all this evidence. It's all there to be found online. This all happened in 2014. And there's also reports that the CIA were funding Ukrainian forces to defend themselves and to fight effectively against Russians back in 2015. So, you know, you could say that this humanitarian catastrophe that's going on that von der Leyen and Trudeau were describing in their talk, this humanitarian catastrophe that's currently going on in Ukraine, this war, this invasion, was basically helped along with the prodding of a stick into the Russian bear by the US, the EU, and all the rest of it. So, you know, some people might think that's a bit rich, really.
Well, there's a lot of hypocrisy around, it seems. You know, you got Julian decrying a murderous genocidal agenda, Russia, Ukraine, whereas I can think of another genocidal murderous agenda going on at the moment, but I don't hear Julian or any other celebrity calling that one out. Funny.
No,
that.
Of course not. Of course not. Just on a sideline here, you remember this? Do you remember the song Salt Water, the Julian Lennon song Salt Water from 1991? It was one of his hits from early back in the day. Salt water gets in my eyes. It was a big hit for him in certain parts of the world. If you watch the video to that, someone's put my attention to it. It looks like there's predictive programming going on. I think basically the song Salt Water is decrying the way that the forests are being mistreated and pollution is you know becoming more prevalent in society and in the world, and we've got to do something about it. But somebody, I'll credit him. Hi, Johnny. If you're listening, Johnny sent me a message and saying, if you want to talk about predictive programming, look at the Julian Lennon video, Saltwater from 1991. At the right at the beginning of it, you've got people walking around a city wearing masks. Okay, so I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, so basically, imagine this version by Julian Lennon was played at the end of this pledging event with von der Leyen, and that was this discussion event, quote unquote, was played at the end of that. Now, the day before that, there was a social media rally. This is what it was called. And basically this social media rally, again, this is to do with Stand Up for Ukraine campaign and Global Citizen. Basically what this social media rally was a way of encouraging people like, you know, Joe Public to hashtag Stand Up for Ukraine in social media, okay, and yeah, just to do that, to hashtag Stand Up for Ukraine in their social media, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, and okay, so according to Global Citizen, its website, this is what the social media rally was. It's one of the largest digital events on social media in order to inspire world leaders to provide urgent refugee relief. As many people as possible are needed to participate in this. The lead up to the pledging event, which is the event, this discussion that I mentioned that happened on April the 9th, so that the world's most powerful cannot turn their backs on those in need. So basically the day before that event, that discussion event with Trudeau and von der Leyen, yeah, there was on April the 8th, the day that this Imagine song was released worldwide, there was this social media rally where people were called on to hashtag Stand Up for Ukraine. Members of the public were invited to do that in order to inspire world leaders to pledge billions at that discussion event, okay, that took place the next day. And it's ridiculous, really, isn't it? I mean, if world leaders are going to, so-called world leaders are going to pledge money, they're going to do it anyway. They're not going to listen to loads of teenagers, you know, hashtagging things on this. But anyway, and a number of so-called celebrities and pop stars and music stars hashtagged and took part in this social media rally, including the usual suspects. Bono, of course, was one of those.
No,
yes, really? Yes, I know it's a surprise, Mark.
Good
but yes,
grief.
he pulled himself out of his inertia and did that. Yeah, what a guy. Also,
Well,
Oprah
he's
Winfrey.
got a big heart. That's what it is.
I know he's got a big something. Also, Oprah Winfrey, Madonna, Celine Dion, John Bon Jovi. Let's read out the name. Let's name and shame, Eddie Vedder, Lenny Kravitz, Elton John, Katy Perry, and the CIA's favorite feminist, Gloria Steinem. So having looked into this for Magical Mystery Talk, ahead of us doing this, to do with Imagine, I wanted to find out who exactly is Global Citizen, because they maybe subconsciously I've come across them, but consciously I wasn't aware of who they were before we did this today. So I looked into what is Global Citizen. Okay, so according to its Facebook page, Global Citizen is it's a movement. Okay, it's a movement using its collective voice to end extreme poverty by 2030. Global citizens learn about the causes of extreme poverty, take action, and earn rewards for their actions as part of a global community committed to lasting change. And according to their website, again, what they're about is Global Citizen campaigns to improve all of the conditions that determine a person's welfare and well-being, as laid out by the United Nations global goals, such as access to quality water, food, and education, as well as eliminating those systematic inequalities that drive poverty and combating climate change. And I wasn't aware of this, but apparently Global Citizen has been behind an annual music festival that's been going on since 2012. And the last one took place, as far as I'm aware, in September of 2022. And I'd never heard of this. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. It's called the Global Citizen Music Festival. And this isn't some, fly-by-night tiny little thing in some local park somewhere. This brings in the big names, the biggest names. I can't remember if you look on Global Citizen's website, you can see all the big names that have appeared there over the years. All the biggest pop stars of the day, like Rihanna and so on and so on. At the September one, for example, which just took place in 2022, the 10th anniversary, you had Metallica, the Jonas Brothers, Mariah Carey, Usher, and Stormzy as well, to name a few. So what is this music festival? So what's it all about? I mean, if it's for an NGO, there must be a purpose behind it. So looking on Global Citizen's website, again, according to its website, the Global Citizen Music Festival brings together global citizens, artists, activists, world leaders, philanthropists, corporate leaders, and more with one collective mission: end extreme poverty now. So one of the philanthropists, quote unquote, who contributed to this year's festival was Bill and Melinda Gates.
Oh, close.
Who, according to the Global Citizen website, donated through the Kill and Melinda Gates Foundation a total of $10.5 million towards the UN so-called Population Fund. Okay, and as well as enjoying the sights and sounds of Metallica, Mariah Carey, Usher, and Stormzy, also at the 2022 festival, there were video messages of support from none other than Joe Biden, also French president and One World Order fan, the previously mentioned Emmanuel Macron, and the current director general of the World Health Organization. Oh, rock on! I want to go to a concert and hear a speech by the WHO boss. Yeah, let's rock, everybody.
I've always thought Joe Biden looked like a Stormzy fan.
Yeah, exactly. If you said Stormzy to him, he says, "Oh, I'll get an umbrella." And
Bill Gates rocking on out to Metallica in his pastel sweater.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so, yeah, just to wrap this up, this particular strand, Global Citizen were actually part of that lockdown festival. Do you remember that? The lockdown music festival. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, stay at home and rock out in your living room. Yeah.
Yeah, that virtual... that happened during the lockdowns. That virtual.
Oh, what a party that was!
Yeah,
that's been forever. That one.
That virtual festival where each music star that was invited along sang in their house one song each in their house or wherever they were during lockdown. Yeah, and
all on their own. Honest.
Yeah, right. So what about the camera?
No makeup artist, no hair.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I never thought. Oh God, how dim. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, if it's a lockdown and no one's allowed to go into each other's houses, how did Annie Lennox, who was one of those who appeared, Rita Ora, Taylor Swift, Chris Martin of Coldplay, and of course Elton John and Paul McCartney, who sang Lady Madonna at that. Yeah, yeah, makeup artists, camera. If it's a lockdown and no one's allowed to,
well, no, they just hooked up their own webcams on their laptops. Simple.
And look perfect. Like their hair's perfect, and makeup, and the camera. The camera is just absolutely perfect. It's just like it's like a professional camera, like you get in a TV studio. So yeah, and of course, Kill Bill Gates was and his wife Kevin Kline, his ex-wife Kevin Kline, were guests of that as well. They appeared in that. Yeah. They appeared in that as well. I mean, of course, they have to, don't they? They have to shoehorn them in somehow. And I think there's an article on Vigilant Citizen because if you've watched that festival, which is like, I can't remember, it's like 5 hours long or something like that. I can't remember, but throughout it, they kept saying, "We are one world together." One world together. They just kept saying it over and over again. That was the slogan, as though Vigilant Citizen, the website, is like suggesting that they were doing that as some sort of subconscious way of, hypnotizing that into your brain. We are one world. But yeah,
world order. Oh shit! Sorry, wrong script.
Yeah, exactly. So that's Global Citizen. That's what Julian was signing himself up for.
Okay, so Chris Holmes. Then, who is this guy?
Okay, so I don't know. I know you want to talk about him, Desiree.
Yeah, he's an interesting character.
He's Paul McCartney's tour DJ. He came out of the
woodwork, right, and he kind of came out of nowhere seemingly, and he's been touring with them, I think, since I want to say 2009, something like that. He was at Coachella was the first place he played with Paul McCartney. And he just comes on. So Paul McCartney never has openers. So he's kind of used this guy as his opener, DJ Chris Holmes. And he just comes out there and he just plays remixes of Beatles songs. And that's all he does. So it's, a huge Beatles fest over and over again. Because I don't think Paul McCartney likes to share the spotlight very much. But he has some interesting posts on his Instagram page of him and his wife wearing some interesting regalia, and he's holding up a pendant that he wears around his neck on one of these photos. And I looked it up and I tried to figure out what it was, and it looks like it's from the Order of the Eastern Star, which is interesting because that's like an offshoot of the Masons. It's not an official Masonic organization, but it's like the daughters and the widows and wives of Masons. Yeah. So it's like women are not allowed to join the Masons. Yeah. So this is like an offshoot of the Masons where women are actually allowed to join. And so this pendant that he's wearing, it's a triangle and it has a chalice in the middle. And it's supposed to signify that he is an electa. That's like his rank within this Order of the Eastern Star. And it seems like his wife is also a part of the Order of the Eastern Star as well, because she's holding up a pendant with the Eye of Ra on it.
Yeah. I've seen that. That's on is that on her Instagram page, isn't it? His wife, Melinda.
Right. Yeah. And then on his, there's another interesting portrait of him in full regalia. He's holding like a lantern, and again, he's wearing that pendant. He has the big eye, the eye with all the rays around it. It's not the Eye of Horus, but it's like the Masonic eye on there, and just in full regalia. It's a really creepy photo. I think it's actually a painting. I don't think it's a photo of him. But it's you know which one I'm talking about. We should.
Yeah, I've actually got it up on my computer. I've got it on my computer right now. It's on his he's posted it on his Facebook page. It was on March 25th of 2022. He says, 10 years ago, my buddies took one of my favorite portraits of me. That's what he says above the picture. That's what he's typed out. And then I'm not an expert on Masonic law occult symbolism. So I'm at a loss. I really don't know what he's. It's definitely occult. It's definitely esoteric. There's no getting away from that. I'm going to post this up on my site. When I post this, once the podcast is up I'm going to post the podcast up as I always do on my site, the Occult Beatles. But I'm also going to put the picture up on the page as well, so people can look at it. He's got. Yeah, he's facing us. So what's his right is our left. I don't know if it's an eye with a sun ray. It's definitely like a sun symbolism type thing. And he's holding a lantern, and he's also doing the strange signal with his hand. And as you say, he's got this necklace on, this with a triangle with it's a triangle, and as you say, it's got this symbol inside it.
It's a chalice.
Yeah, chalice. Yeah. I really, really don't know what that's all about. I really, really have no idea. And there's another symbol on his Facebook page from 2018, and it's a mosaic. I don't know if it's on a wall or on the floor. I don't even know where it's from. Where what building he took this from. But it's like a crest or a seal, and in the crest is the number 33. So I don't know. I have no idea what's going on there. He doesn't really give you a clue as to what's going on there. So it's probably for those with the eyes that can see it. But that's Paul McCartney's tour DJ, his support DJ.
Exactly.
I think you're right, actually. I don't think he's ever Paul McCartney up to this point. I think this Chris Holmes guy, apparently he was also a tour DJ for Daft Punk and Radiohead back in the day. And he also played keyboards for the Smashing Pumpkins, apparently, in the late 90s. So,
and he does have a band.
He has a band.
Called the Ishtar Command.
Oh gosh,
which is very interesting, because it's all like kind of alien-like. It says, I'm looking at their Wikipedia page right now, and it says the Ashtar Command is an intergalactic council of space brothers and sisters who oversee all the good aliens and are at war with all the bad aliens. That's their motto.
Okay, all right.
Very, very, very strange.
Yeah.
And it says they don't try to it says the Ashtar Command doesn't simplify, justify, or explain, preferring to revel in the process of open-minded exploration. So, and it's kind of like a kind of psychedelic rock, kind of electronica type music. They call themselves indie rock. But it's kind of trancy. It's pretty interesting. So and they have just strange. Oh, and then if you go to they have a website. If you go to their website, there's this really strange artwork with like these children that are they kind of look like they're supposed to be cherubs, like angels, but they're all naked, of course. And have like stars covering their naughty parts, but you can click on each one of them, and each one of them will take you to a different place. And one of them will take you to like Kenneth Anger films, and one of them will take you to one of their songs, like a video on one of their songs, and then one of them takes you to an interview that supposedly Chris Holmes did with Heaven's Gate. Are you familiar with the Heaven's Gate cult?
No, I'm not.
So this is actually kind of hits home to me in a way, because Heaven's Gate back in the 90s became kind of a media sensation, because they all they're right here in San Diego, right where I'm at. They all committed mass suicide, and in this big, huge mansion, they were all wearing the same exact clothes and Nikes. They covered themselves up. They took some poison and all went to sleep, and supposedly we're going to hitchhike on the tail end of a comet where there was a UFO following it. They went to join their alien overlords or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was called the Heaven's Gate cult, and he has this interview supposedly with the leader of this cult, that before they all committed mass suicide, and it's pages and pages long of this interview with this cult leader here in San Diego. And so it's just really it must have taken place in like 93, because I believe 94 is when they all committed suicide. So there's just really strange things. And then, like I said, another link will take you to Kenneth Anger films, and another link will take you to this other random place. And it's very, very strange. This guy is very weird. And if it's like, how did him and Paul McCartney actually hook up? How did they become aware of one another?
Exactly.
And for him to tour, he's been on tour with this guy for over 10 years now.
Yeah.
So very weird, very weird.
I mean, the Kenneth Anger thing. If you look on Chris's website, on his Facebook page, I think it's September 2019. There's a photograph of Chris with a then 92-year-old Kenneth Anger sitting with him. And from what I can tell from the literature that is typed above it, that Chris has put as its intro to the picture, basically it looks like he's backstage at an event which he was basically DJing. He was the DJ at this Kenneth Anger event, and it was a Kenneth Anger event which was basically showcasing some of Kenneth Anger's films from back in the day. I mean, Kenneth Anger, the guy the Aleister Crowleyite, the self-confessed Aleister Crowley disciple, who is said to have been the inspiration for the Rolling Stones' Sympathy for the Devil, who was very close to the Rolling Stones back in the 60s and maybe early 70s as well. Lived with Keith Richards for a time, if I'm not mistaken. Was it Mick Jagger provided the backing, the incidental music for one of Kenneth's films, Invocation of My Demon Brother, which came out in 1968 and which stars Bobby Beausoleil, who was friends with Kenneth Anger at the time. And of course, then apparently what happened, Kenneth and Bobby went their different ways, and they had a bit of a bust up. And lo and behold, Bobby ends up meeting Charles Manson and getting indirectly linked into the so-called Manson killings. Bobby wasn't actually involved in the killings of Sharon Tate at the Cielo Drive killings over those 2 nights, but he was involved with the killing of the drug dealer Gary Hinman, which is kind of connected to those other 2 killings. So he's currently in jail. He's got life, I think, for that. So this is the sort of guy that Chris is hanging around with.
Exactly. And there's always a couple of degrees of separation between all of these things. It's like, well, why does Paul McCartney associate with this guy? Why has he chosen him to be his opening act? When he's never had an opening act prior to this. It's always about Paul McCartney. It's never about anybody else. And
I mean, we might be wrong, but certainly I don't think in the 70s, I wasn't old enough to go back then, but I don't think up until 10 years ago, when he took on Chris Holmes as his support act DJ, he'd never had a support band or support singer or anything of that type.
No, never.
Certainly when I went to see him I saw him in 89 on his world tour, and I think the next world tour was in 92, 93. I went and saw him then, and there was no support then. It's just him, like you say, it's just him. He does like just 2-3 hour shows, and that's it. But he's got this guy. Yeah. But Chris has actually got some connection to George Harrison's family as well through his wife. Now, did you watch the Glastonbury? McCartney did the Glastonbury. He headlined the Glastonbury Festival in England in 2022. Right. He played the Pyramid stage. I watched a bit of it. I have to say, I can't watch McCartney these days because his voice is just shot to pieces. It's just, he just can't hit those notes anymore. I just find it painful to watch and listen to. But I did try to watch it because it was actually on, although the festival is actually televised on the BBC, and Paul McCartney's headlining set was actually televised on the main BBC channel. I think it was on BBC Two, so it was on one of the main channels. It was broadcast across the nation, so anyone could watch it. And yeah, so I was watching it, and I sort of gave up after about 3 or 4 or 5 songs. I just couldn't listen anymore. But apparently, something that did take my notice was about 2 or 3 songs into it, he said to the audience, "Here we are among the magic ley lines of Glastonbury." I thought, that's interesting. What made him say that? And so I looked a little bit into this, and apparently he talked about the same kind of thing back in 2020, because he was meant to play the headline of Glastonbury, which Glastonbury is near the village of Pilton, in the English county of Somerset, which is very near Stonehenge, which is very magical. He was meant to play it in 2020, but then the lockdowns came and the festival got called off. So that's why he played in 2022 instead. But during an interview ahead of that in 2020, ahead of that festival, which got called off, he said, ley lines. Yeah, I've got a friend who's very into that. A friend who says, yeah, man, did you know it's on the ley lines? They all cross and they all intercept at Glastonbury. So I kind of like that. That's what that's to quote Paul McCartney. That's what he said in this interview. And yeah, apparently, I'm not going off tangent here, but just basically I think the Glastonbury Festival started in 1970, 71, something like that. I might be wrong, but it was somewhere around that time. And the pyramid stage was apparently was designed according to occult teachings. And this is actually according to the designer of it, a guy by the name of Bill Harkin. He claims that when he went into his design studio to make the pyramid stage, or to design the stage, he eventually came up with this pyramid stage idea because he looked into a book by a guy by the name of Alfred Watkins, who'd been around in the early part of the 20th century. And he's pretty much looked upon as like the pioneer of the investigation into ley lines. He wrote quite a lot of books about the subject. So this Bill Harkin looked at this ley hunter's manual, it's called, by Alfred Watkins. And he did indeed find, according to this book, that Glastonbury Abbey and Stonehenge and Worthy Farm, which is the site where the Glastonbury Festival is held, all intersect with each other. All the ley lines in that area intersect between Glastonbury Abbey, Stonehenge, and Worthy Farm. They all intersect. So there's kind of this magical thing going on, according to him. So applying that information from that book, that manual, and also some magical elements, and I'm paraphrasing here from Bill Harkin himself. That's how he created the pyramid stage. And he also got inspiration from John Dee, Dr. John Dee, who was in the 16th century. He was an occultist, magician. He was also Queen Elizabeth's so-called right-hand man, her advisor. He was also a mathematician, astronomer, navigator. For example, he revolutionized maritime exploration. He helped to expand Britain's expansion across the world as a result. And he's also credited with coming up with the term the British Empire. So basically, the idea for the pyramid stage is based on occult information, teachings by John Dee, and also this ley hunter's manual. Now, where McCartney he said in this interview in 2020 that he's got this friend who's very much into this kind of magical stuff. I'm wondering whether that friend was the very person that was his support DJ at Glastonbury, if I'm not mistaken, Chris Holmes. Chris Holmes was actually, I think there is a photograph on his Facebook page, Chris Holmes doing the support DJ set at Glastonbury before McCartney went on. So it's quite possible that McCartney got this magical information from Chris, although a big part of me does think, oh, come on, mate. Are you really telling me that McCartney and the Beatles didn't know about all of this stuff? Because all this stuff was very much in vogue in the 60s. Ley lines, Stonehenge, standing stones, Glastonbury, all of that was very much in vogue in the 1960s. It was something that the Rolling Stones looked into and with some depth. So I don't know. I'm not so sure that he. I don't know. I'm not quite so. I'm not. I think it's possible, but but yeah, Chris's wife, Melinda Lee Holm, according to her website, according to her LinkedIn page, she is, and I quote, a tarot priestess, author, professional witch, and the creator of Melinda Lee Holm Beauty, which is a collection of potions crafted around magical ingredients. So that's magical with a K. And so, yeah, beauty products. So we're talking fragrance oils, body oils, face oils, detox face mask, lip potion. And apparently she's got a lip potion, which is, according to her own description, created from cinnamon, which is a magical activator used in spells. So yeah, she uses magical ingredients with a K to make these products, such as cinnamon, also frankincense and ginger, which she describes as an activator of elemental fire. And I looked at her website, and she's written a couple of books. One is called Excerpts from Your, it's called Your Magical Year, again with a K. And in that book, apparently there's a section in that, and it's featured on her website, and the title of it is "What is Magic?" with a K. The practice of magic is as old as civilization and just as diverse. When you say "bless you" after someone sneezes, you are practicing a form of magic, reciting an incantation meant to keep that person safe from harm. There is nothing inherently scary or dangerous about practicing magic. Just like most things in life, it's all in the attitude. Approach magic with the intention of deepening understanding and encouraging empowerment of yourself and others. Focus on your own work and leave others to theirs. Magic is an expression of your personal relationship with yourself, your guides, the earth, elements, universe, and all that is divine. Treat it with reverence and love. She's also had a book out called Divine Your Dinner, a cookbook for using tarot as your guide to magical meals. And apparently one of her fans is, and this is where we get another connection. This is where we get the connection into George Harrison's world. She's also friends with Olivia, George Harrison's widow. And indeed, I think Olivia is actually a client of Melinda's. She's had tarot readings from her. I think she's certainly been a customer of magical fragrances. She's actually mentioned them on her own Instagram page. And she's described Melinda as her intrepid, mystical traveling companion. And if you look on Melinda's, I think it's on her Instagram page, there are pictures of her and Melinda and Olivia meditating in India. It looks like it's in India, in a temple in India with a checkerboard, and the photograph is them in it looks like a temple with a checkerboard floor. But yeah, and if you look on there, on her Instagram page, and I think also on Chris's social media pages, there's loads of pictures of Chris and Melinda at various functions and parties with Olivia. And so there's so they're close. Maybe that's how Paul McCartney met Chris, through Olivia, through the Harrison family. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Chris has got actual connections to the Harrisons as well. Not only just because of through his marriage to Melinda, but Melinda was apparently in 2021. My Sweet Lord, the George Harrison song "My Sweet Lord" was remastered, and it was taken, and it's of course taken from the "All Things Must Pass" album, which came out in '71, I think, and that was re-released in '71. It was remastered, and and there was a video released of "My Sweet Lord." To mark the 50th anniversary of the release of the album and of the song. And in this video, it's basically one of these cameo appearance videos. He got loads of well-known faces in it. There's Mark Hamill, who was Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. Rosanna Arquette is in it. Jeff Lynne, Weird Al Yankovic, Ringo is in it. Olivia's in it, and Melinda's in it as well. And apparently the video, the co-executive producer was Danny, who is Olivia's son. George is an Olivia's son, and was produced by Chris Holmes. So it was actually produced by him. So that's probably
interesting.
Yeah. So you've got all these connections going on. And if you watch the video, actually, it takes place in a cinema called the Vista Theatre in LA. A movie theatre in LA, and it's festooned with ancient Egyptian decor, both inside and out. So yeah, if you ever watch that video, that might catch your attention as well. They go into this movie theatre, which just happens to be filled with ancient Egyptian sort of symbology all over the place. But yeah, really fascinating character. Strange.
Yeah, I do want to say too, it's kind of funny, since we're doing the 2022 in review, we Paul McCartney did turn 80 last year. We didn't even mention it, but we did it, when John Lennon turned 80, we did like a 85-hour special.
Yeah.
Kind of funny.
That's right. I did that that podcast for Mark on his Good Vibrations podcast, didn't I? Lennon at 80. And Mark did say to me, actually, he said, I don't know if we could do one about McCartney, but I think you could. I think you could easily do one, but I don't think it would be filled with plaudits, would it? I don't know.
Right.
It would be more of a suspect one. It would be full of more suspicion attached to it than the John Lennon one. I don't know.
Right.
But, you could certainly do one. There's absolutely no doubt about it. You could do one. Yeah. And that's even keeping the Paul is dead issue out of it. You could do one.
He's got enough weirdness around him for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just all sorts of weird things going on. Shall we mention the Sharona situation with Ringo's granddaughter?
Sure. Might as well.
So did you read up on this? Do you know a lot about this one, about his granddaughter Tasha breaking their lockdown rules?
Right. I read briefly. She got in trouble. They went to court.
Yeah. She went to court. It was in March of 2022, I think it was, and she was fined £440 reportedly by a court in London because she'd broken the lockdown rules in the UK in February of 2021. Wow. And I don't know if this is true. I'd love it if it was, because I just think it's so inspired. She said to the judge when he gave her the fine, and I'm reading the report here from the news report, one of the mainstream news reports. She asked the judge whether the fine could be overturned if the then British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was cleared by the authorities for having broken lockdown rules himself, which I thought was really inspired. I thought that was brilliant. That's just brilliant. I mean, because at the time, Boris Johnson, who was then British Prime Minister, was being investigated for breaking lockdown rules during 2020 and 2021. Over the course of 1 year, he'd according to investigations by police, there had been something like 16 or so different infringements of the lockdown rules, 16 or so different illegal or what you would term illegal social gatherings, or basically breaking the lockdown rules. 16 of them. So yeah, this was reported on in the media at the time. It was branded a scandal, the Partygate scandal, and so it goes. So what happened was basically Boris Johnson, who was then British Prime Minister, and his then Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who's now, as we speak, the new UK Prime Minister, they'd been found to have broken lockdown rules during 2020 and 2021. Basically, this is according to leaked information that got leaked, and photographs that got leaked and video footage that got leaked. Apparently, what was going on between 2020 and 2021 was Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak were involved in quote unquote social gatherings that took place at number 10 Downing Street, or around either at number 10 Downing Street or on 10 Downing Street in another property within Downing Street, next to 10 Downing Street. And 10 Downing Street was, of course, the official residence of the Prime Minister. And apparently between 2020 and 2021, there were these social gatherings that took place, and it involved Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, other members of Boris Johnson's then government, staff who worked at number 10 Downing Street, and other staff who worked in other areas, other buildings within Downing Street itself. There were these gatherings taking place. Now, at the time, if I recall, I think Boris Johnson denied it all and said that basically these weren't parties, he said. These were business meetings, which is a bit odd. If you look at the footage, if you see the leaked footage and the photographs of everything, they don't look like business meetings. We're talking people drinking alcohol. It's certainly not footage of people sitting around tables, reading documents and looking, look like they're really hard at work. We're talking about people chilling out, relaxing and having a glass of something. And even if it was a work-related thing, right? The rest, what about everybody else that was under lockdown, right? How did they cope with business meetings? Well, if they had all right, let's just believe what Boris claimed, that these were actual business meetings that had to happen. Well, why couldn't he have done what everyone else was doing under lockdown, which is use Skype, Zoom, WhatsApp, FaceTime? Or emails, whatever, what's the problem? So what makes him different to everybody else? So basically, while the rest of the UK and other parts of the world were not allowed to see their loved ones, were not allowed to go visit their elderly parents or grandparents in care homes who needed to see them, whilst the rest of the world wasn't allowed to go to work, while the rest of the world, the UK or parts of the world were suffering from physical medical problems that could have been serious, but were not allowed to go and see their doctor, their GP, while they weren't allowed to go out and have a drink. These people were having drinks and partying it up. And so basically what happened, as I said earlier, according to investigations by police, something like 16 or so different social gatherings took place on or around in Downing Street or around it. Between 2020 and 2021, and there was something like over 100 fines as a result. And in April, a month after Tasha Starkey, Ringo Starr's granddaughter, got the fine, a month after that, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak were both fined for breaking the lockdown rules. But I don't know whether Tasha actually got her fine overturned. I did try looking online to see if I could find any news stories, but no, I wouldn't have thought so. But if that's true, if she actually did that, hats off to her for saying that. It takes some balls to do something like that. Apparently she broke the lockdown rules in February of 2021 because police were called over to her place in London because police were called over to a place in London and discovered that she, quote unquote, had illegally participated in a gathering of 2 or more people. According to the prosecution at a court hearing on the day she was fined, I think, the police turned up to her address. I don't know if it's a house or apartment or whatever, but it was in London. They heard, quote unquote, according to the prosecution, loud music and singing. And then when the police went inside the property, there were people, quote unquote, drinking alcohol. She according to the prosecution again, my goodness. Oh, wow. And Tasha said to the police, according to the prosecution, that, these people didn't live in her property. They were her friends letting their hair down and enjoying themselves after finishing work. And that she and the others that were in the property were all part of a band. And indeed, Tasha is a musician. She's a bass player, although she does, as far as I'm aware, she also does backing vocals. She plays in bands mainly. She's not super successful. And by that, I mean, she's not mainstream, uber commercially successful. She's not, hitting the charts and having great big hits, but she's certainly not a slouch. She's been in bands that have released albums and had singles out, and you can find these online. There's videos of her in music videos, and she's been interviewed a couple of times. These can all be found on YouTube and SoundCloud and Bandcamp and all these sites. One of the bands she was in was a band called My Vitriol, and she was in that band in 2013, not for too long, I don't think. I might be wrong, but she was certainly in the band around that time. They were a band who actually enjoyed some UK chart success in the early 2000s. They had some top 40 UK hit singles, 3 of them, and a top 30 album. And also between 2013 and 2014, she played bass for the band Lola Colt. And she played on one of their albums, which is called Away from the Water, and that's available online. You can find that, I think, on SoundCloud or Bandcamp. But the main band that she's tied to is Bella Kiss, which is a 4-piece rock band originally from London, and that was a band that was formed sometime in 2009. I don't know if they're still going though. I did check on their Facebook page, and their Facebook page hasn't been updated since 2017, but certainly if you want to go have a listen and a look to that band, there's loads of stuff on there, like singles they've released and albums, music videos and everything. But and one of the people that's in the band, again, this is one of these weird sort of, you might call it coincidence, you might call it synchronicity, you might call it orchestrated. One of these weird things in the world of the Beatles, as you know well, Desiree. Aside from Tasha, another member in this band, Bella Kiss, is someone by the name of I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Ruari Mian, right? Ruari Mian, and he's the son. He's the son of none other than Tony Meehan, who used to be the drummer in the early 60s of the Shadows. Which was a very, I don't know about in the US, but certainly in the UK in the 60s, they were a very successful guitar instrumental band. And he was with them as their drummer in the early 60s. And then he left in 1961-62, and he became a talent spotter, an A&R man and a producer for Decca Records at the same time that the Beatles went there to audition for them. So, yeah, it's just another one of those weird things, you know. What do you know about the All-Star Band, Ringo Starr's band? Have you ever seen them live?
I have seen them. It's been years. I probably saw them in the late 90s. But as far as I know, every tour he gets different members to his All-Star Band. So he'll pick, or going on tour with him will be a famous guitarist from a band, and then a famous. He always has a second drummer on there with him, a famous drummer from the band and a famous bassist, and whatnot. He kind of forms his all-star band and goes on tour for that leg of the tour with these certain people. And it's just it was a pretty good show. It's something that being a Beatles fan I had to see at least once. But yeah, he's going on tour again, I hear, this year coming up.
Oh right,
I know he's coming here. Yeah, I'm not sure who's in the band this time going around, but
yeah,
Ringo's pretty up. I mean, he's 83, I think. He's pretty up there. He was the oldest in the Beatles.
Yeah, he's going to be 83 this year, isn't he?
83, I think. Yeah,
83. Yeah.
So, but he's still going strong apparently, even though he caught COVID twice.
Yeah.
From what I hear.
Yeah.
And canceled his tour last year.
Yeah,
he was supposed to tour last year, canceled it, and I believe he's restarting, and because he is coming here in San Diego, I believe, I want to say April or May, something like that this year. I don't think I'll go, but
yeah. I looked on Wikipedia because I don't think he's played that. This all-star band of his, I don't think he's played that much in Britain, has he? He's mainly kept it. I mean, he has played in Europe and everything, but I'm not saying he hasn't. But he's mainly kept it within North America, Canada. Hasn't? Am I wrong? But it just seems to me that he tends to play this all-star band tends to play more in America. Am I wrong? Or,
right.
But so I don't know. So. So I don't know too much about them. I've never got the chance to see them live in concert. I'm in the UK, so I don't recall it ever coming to the UK that I was conscious of. But of course, That doesn't mean they haven't, and it's just that I didn't consciously notice it. So I've had to look on Wikipedia to find out more about this all-star band of his. They've been touring since 1989. And as you say, it's one of these fluid lineups, isn't it? So it's never the same lineup. It's a lineup made up of members who have had hits, who are famous in their own right, basically.
Right. He kind of forms his own supergroup every time.
It's like a supergroup. I've written down some of the past members. You got Dr. John, Dave Edmunds, Peter Frampton, Howard Jones. Who remembers Howard Jones from the 1980s? Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, prog rock gods. Rod Argent, Graham Goldman from 10cc, and also Billy Preston, of course, who played on the Let It Be album, played on Get Back and all the other songs from the Let It Be album, or most of them, or a lot of them. The current lineup, or the lineup that because he was on tour in 2022 until it got cancelled because of the Rona. He had to cancel it because he caught the Rona. So he was on tour in 2022. It kicked off in May, but then got cut short in October. But the lineup for that one was, I've got it written down here. Where is it? Oh yeah, we've got Steve Lukather, who is probably the hardest working session musician ever. He's just about played on every single and album. All right, maybe I'm overstating it there, but he's one of the busiest session musicians ever. He's played on, for decades. He's played on loads of singles and albums. I think he played on the Thriller album as well, guitar. And he also is from the band Toto as well. So he's in the current lineup. We also got Colin Hay. Isn't Colin Hay from Men at Work? That band that had the hit with I think I might be wrong. Also Hamish Stewart, who was in the Average White Band and who was also in McCartney's band. He played on McCartney's 1989 album Flowers in the Dirt. He also toured on the 89 World Tour, also the World Tour in the 90s. He played on the Off the Ground album by McCartney. So he was with McCartney for quite a while. So he's in that lineup. He was in the 2022 lineup, and also Edgar Winter as well. So I actually saw a concert, an all-star band concert. There was one that was televised over Christmas. It was on TV, and it was from 2012, and it was from the Staples Center somewhere in the US. And and it's
Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's it. And basically, it's just Ringo singing his hits from the Beatles, singing his Beatles, the songs that he sang in the Beatles, singing solo hits of his. And he drums and he sings as well. He comes up front and takes the mic as well. There's another drummer with him as well, I think, as you said. But the other members in the band are well known as well. They've had hits, and from watching, I quite enjoyed it actually. I thought it was quite good, and I thought Ringo was in fine fettle. I think he sang really well. And Steve Lukather came up and did Toto's hit Africa. So each member came up and sang hits from their own career.
From their own.
Yeah.
Right.
So we had this tour in 2022, and then in October it was announced that 7 shows were cancelled. So the announcement was made in October that 7 shows in total from the tour were cancelled, which meant that the tour, that those dates that were cancelled were actually cancelled from the 1st and 2nd week of that month of October, and the rest of the tour was put on hold. And that was because Ringo announced that he'd got the Sharona, and then after that announcement, it was announced that another 2 dates were cancelled. And I seem to recall Mark Devlin. I seem to recall Mark at the time when this came out on his Facebook page. He goes, "Oh, that's odd that he should get the Sharona, seeing as he's been given the arm spear twice." And apparently in an interview in USA Today from 2021, he was asked, "Have you gotten your arm spear yet?" And he says, "Yeah, I've got both, and I'm feeling groovy." Okay, so so all those dates were cancelled, or put on, were cancelled in the 1st and 2nd week of October. That announcement was made in the 1st week of October, and then about a week or so after that, Ringo announced via Twitter that he had got over it, He'd had a test and he was fine, and the tour was back on. And then, bang! 3 days later, he was back on social media to announce that he got it again, and that the whole tour was now cancelled. This isn't the first time it happened. I might be wrong, but I might be wrong about this. But a lot of the attention about this tour being, about him getting the Sharona and everything, seems to focus in on October during the tour. But apparently, the tour had been postponed earlier on, about a month after it started. So the tour kicked off in May, and in June, it was announced that Edgar Winter had got it. On June 7th, it was announced that Edgar Winter had got it, but they were going to play on. They decided they could carry on without him, and then once Edgar was, got over it, he'd be back again. But then on June the 11th, it was announced that Steve Lukather had also got it. So the whole some dates were rescheduled as a result. So that was not the first time it had happened. So I don't know if they'd had the arms spear. I'm assuming they would have done.
Probably.
Yeah. So not very effective. Okay. Shall we wrap this up then? Something that I think you might be interested in mentioning before we toodle off is Mark Chapman. He was up for parole again in 2022, towards the end of it, and this was his 12th time. It was in September, and it was rejected again.
Denied again. Yeah.
Denied again.
Do you think that he'll ever get out? Maybe after Yoko passes? I don't think he will. I think they'll keep denying it. I don't know, but it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. What was the original sentence? Was it 20 years to life, or was it 25 years? Or
I think it was 20, if I recall correctly. I don't have the information right in front of me, but I think it was 20 to life. And, so with the possibility of parole.
Yeah.
And he's just never gotten it.
And Serhan has... No, it's not Serhan. It's... oh, God, who was Mark Chapman's lookalike? The one that tried to assassinate Reagan. The name's gone. Charles Hinckley.
Oh, Hinckley, you're right.
Yeah, he's been released, hasn't he?
I'm not sure.
I think he's been released. Really? I might be wrong, but I seem to recall there were some reports either in 2022 or 2021 that he's actually out. He's been released. Okay, he didn't kill Reagan, in his attempt, but he's out. Okay. Yeah, there's actually a transcript online of the parole hearing, if anyone could be bothered to read it, of the 12th rejection. And I'm to quote here. This is what the parole board said. This is part of what they said. They said this is what they said to Mark Chapman as to why they weren't going to let him out. The worldwide impact of your crime resonates such as to evoke images, memories, and emotions internationally, leading the panel to concur that your release at this time would be incompatible with the welfare of society. The panel is significantly concerned about your behavior before and during the incarcerating offense, underscoring your stated quest to be immortalized, identifying murdering your victim as your path to said end. So again, they're coming out with this claim that basically Mark Chapman killed John Lennon because he wanted to be famous. But as we said in that legendary 2-part podcast into the assassination, if Mark Chapman had wanted to become famous, why did he refuse a trial? Why did he plead guilty instead of not guilty, thus denying himself the chance to take part in probably the century's greatest trial? So the stage would have been his across the world. So why did he do that? And B, for someone who wanted fame, how come is it that in a total of something like 40 odd years, he's only actually ever taken part in 4 publicly released projects? in terms of being an interviewer or and that would be the book Let Me Take You Down by Jack Jones, which he was interviewed for. There was a magazine interview as well, which I think was with People magazine, I think maybe, and there were 2 TV appearances, one with Larry King on CNN and the other one with Barbara Walters. So for someone who wanted fame, why did he only do that and nothing else? So there you go. That's it.
Yeah, and he must be getting pretty up there in age as well, I'd imagine. But imagine that's the
he was 25. He was 25 when in 1980, wasn't he? Yeah.
So then he'd be like 65, 67, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So I guess that's not too up there. But I'm sure as long as Yoko's still around, he will not be released.
Which might not be for much longer. I don't want to be callous or morbid, but it might not be for much longer because she's pushing near 90 now. And she hasn't been well, from what I understand.
I think she's 90 this year. I want to say.
Oh right. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, 1933. Yeah. Same year as my dad. Yeah. She's going to be 90 this year. My goodness. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the last time I saw any pictures of her, she was struggling to walk. She had like a walking frame or walking sticks or something. And there's some reports that she's had cancer. I don't know if that's true, but she put up this rather weird tweet, or she said something in an interview. I can't remember where I read the quote, but she said something about how having this disease, she said, has made me appreciate life or see life in a different way. And I'm really paraphrasing there, but she didn't say what the illness was. And of course, the running of the estate, the Lennon estate, has now been handed over to her son Sean. Now he's now the head of it. He's now taking care of everything. So it looks like, she's not too good at the minute. So
well,
I don't know if you've got anything else to add, or you want to wrap this up. It's up to you.
I guess so. I think we covered a lot of bases there.
Yeah.
Covered a lot of tracks.
Yeah, certainly. We could have mentioned the Rolling Stone article briefly.
Right.
Shall we quickly mention that before we go? Because it's not that long, is it?
The new conspiracy.
Let's finish with this. December 7th, 2022, Rolling Stone magazine, the Bible of the music world, so we're told, came out with this article in which it claims that people that QAnon followers, right wingers, are hooked on Beatles conspiracies. I'll just read a quick bit of it. Okay, just the inflammatory bits. Okay, so the headline reads: QAnon followers are arguing if the Beatles were involved in witchcraft and child sacrifice. This is Rolling Stone magazine, December 7th, 2022, and this is by Miles Klee. And a quick thank you to Andrew Arnett, the researcher, for sending this on to me. Okay, as the biggest rock band of the 20th century, the Beatles were naturally also the subject of an infamous conspiracy theory. According to urban legend, Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by an imposter, with his surviving bandmates leaving cryptic clues to the cover-up in their music and album art. Decades later, a far-right fringe movement would make this kind of outlandish claim as well. As a matter of course, QAnon followers who started out as Trump loyalists, believing that he was engaged in a secret war with the deep state and a cabal of paedophile elites, have floated the idea that JFK Jr. is still alive and suggested that President Biden is actually a robot. They come to these conclusions in much the same way as a 60s stoner would have, quote unquote, proved that Paul was dead, by interpreting images and texts in a way that no reasonable person ever would. QAnon too holds that the people running the world like to taunt us with hints of their evil influence, that the evidence is always hidden in plain sight. So it can't be a surprise that this cult is arguing about whether the Beatles were tied up in witchcraft. And I won't read anymore, but basically the article then goes on to say that this QAnon cult have discussed via social media or on chat forums basically many of the conspiracies that are out there, the claims and rumors that bandied around in the alternative media, in the so-called alternative media, things like the Tavistock Institute, the so-called Butcher album cover, Child Sacrifice, the song Imagine being an NWO anthem, Aleister Crowley on the cover of Sergeant Pepper, Charles Manson. And they took some of their information from a QAnon chat forum called greatawakening.win. So there you go, Desiree. We are QAnon, right-wing, fascist, tinfoil hat wearing, radical extremist freaks, basically.
Right.
Okay.
That have been doing this way longer than QAnon ever existed. But yeah, that's beside the point.
Yeah, that's beside the point. They've taken a conspiracy theory about music and turned it into politics.
Right. I don't understand how they. I don't know, but I was actually kind of delighted that mirror pyramid image of the Sgt. Pepper's album.
Oh yeah, it's on there. It's on there.
Pyramid. It's on there. I was like, oh wow, that's mainstream now. That's great.
Yeah, the image which shows that if you mirror image the Sgt. Pepper album, you get a phallic symbol at the bottom, and you get Crowley's head, who's because it's at the top because of course Crowley's on the album, so you get his head at the top as the center point of the entire picture. That was such a fringe picture, and by fringe I mean it was a picture that was swapped around within the alternative scene, and they've now just slap bang put it into the mainstream now. So
kind of did.
Yeah, it's disturbing actually when you read some of the comments at the bottom of the article from readers. They're really disturbing. They're just calling conspiracy theorists nut jobs and freaks and retarded. And the last time I looked, I didn't see one comment actually supporting any of the theories that were put forward in the article or defending the likes of us. Everyone was like slagging it down, slagging conspiracy theorists, quote unquote, down. It was quite disturbing looking at. Some of it was quite visceral, actually. But
it was.
Yeah.
And I feel like the whole term conspiracy theorist has has this really negative connotation to it now that it didn't just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Everybody was kind of conspiracy theory, whatever, but now it's like a very negative. I don't know. I almost hesitate to call what we do a conspiracy theory at this point. It's not. I don't know.
Some of it is looking into occult esoteric aspects. I mean, when we talk about DJ Chris Holmes, we're not I'm not looking at it from a conspiracy. Maybe I'm a little bit, but it's more occult when you're talking about Stonehenge and you're talking about the pyramid stage and you're talking about Chris Holmes and the costumes he's wearing with all these weird symbols on. That's occult. That's the esoteric. Why can't we talk about things like that? These people, when they put these costumes on and take pictures of themselves, are saying to the public, "Hey, look, everybody, we're into occult symbology." So why is that mad for us to then look at it and say, "Hey, look, he's wearing occult symbology"? How can that be?
Exactly.
How can that be political? Right wing, left wing, middle wing, whatever wing you want. How can that be that? Or how can it be far right extremism? How can it be QAnon? How is it connected to Trump, for crying out loud?
Right.
Why does even Trump have to be? Trump is in everything. It's just, oh look, there's a tornado coming. Oh, that's Trump's fault. It's just Trump. Look, guys, Trump was voted out years ago. Okay. Whether legally or not, he's out. Okay, so let's drop it now and move on.
We're moving on.
Why are we still going on about George Bush Jr. and the atrocities and the crimes that he committed? In Iraq and Afghanistan and 9/11 and all the rest.
Bring that back.
Exactly, but we don't talk about him. We talk about Trump, this, Trump, that, Trump. Right. Whether you support him or not, come on, let's just drop that now and just move on.
Right.
But maybe move on is a good point for us. Did you like the link there, Desiree? To bring this to a close. Yeah, what do you think? Unless you've got any other parting shots to give us before we go.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that, hopefully 2023 is going to be better than 2022. I'm ready.
Groovy.
We'll see.
Well, I think that just about wraps it up for this show, number 9. Big thanks as ever to Matt and Desiree for their incisive research into all this good stuff. We'll try and do another episode before too long, a bit later this year. In the meantime, if you want to catch these guys' work in written form, you can head over to their blog sites. So Matt's got his Occult Beatles and also Conspiro Media WordPress sites, and Desiree's blog is the number 9 blog, appropriately enough to this show. Links to those will be in the show notes below. In the meantime, thanks to all the regular listeners who tune into these episodes. We do get a fair bit of correspondence now from people saying they look forward to the next one, so we'll try not to make you wait too long next time. Till then, cheers for now.